Welcome, everyone. As we have quorum, I would like to call, hey, and Ben has just made it. Hello, sir. I would like to call to order this September 27th, 2018 regular Board of Directors meeting for the Reston Association. As I mentioned, we have quorum. We have one other director who will be coming in flight. Director Carr was held up, but he's on his way. This evening, Directors Anton and Hebert will not be able to join us, so we're expecting 7 directors here this evening. And we welcome all of you. Thank you so much for coming out on this rainy night in Reston. Too bad we haven't had much rain here in Reston. No, we've had a lot of rain here in Reston during monsoon season. So again, welcome. Thank you so much for coming out and showing your interest and engagement in our community. It's lovely to have everybody here. I'm going to make 2 opening remarks. It does say call to order and opening remarks. The first opening remark I will make, again, Hidden Creek Golf Course is on the agenda tonight, and we'll be hearing information from both the golf course owner, Wheelock, and from Rescue Reston. And we are always happy to hear comments from members. It's the way this association is supposed to work. So we're always happy to hear comments from members. But if you think your comment will mimic something that Rescue Reston will say in their 20-minute presentation, or something that Wheelock and Associates will say in its presentation, I might recommend that you wait until a future meeting to make those comments. Again, tonight there is no decisions, no actions will be made by this board on this subject. It's information only. We will be learning and digesting. We may ask some questions of both Connie when she's up, of the Wheelock team when they're up, but we'll not be making any votes or any actions. So again, if you believe that your comment may mimic in one of the comments from the presentation from Rescue Reston or Wheelock, I might just recommend that if it's all right, we postpone that to a future meeting, just to keep the meeting moving forward. But again, if the spirit moves you and you feel it important to move and have that comment made tonight, we certainly welcome it. All right. The second thing is that there are also really wonderful opportunities ongoing to make some comments, and that's because we're in the middle of the Reston Association listening session series. We had our first listening session last night from the North Point district up at the Lake House. Director Mooney held a session up there that I was happy to be a part of, and we had a lovely conversation, again, in a rainy night. So, but we had that one. We have 3 more upcoming. I'll just mention them again on Wednesday. They're all on Wednesdays. So Wednesday, October 3rd, the South Lakes listening session will be held at the Nature House. On October 10th, the Hunters Woods Dogwood District listening session will be held at Southgate Community Center. And then on October 17, the Lake Antall Oaks listening session will be held at Reston Community Center, Lake Ann. All sessions start at 7 p.m. Again, all sessions start at 7 p.m. So we look forward to seeing as many of you as we can over those next 3 Wednesdays, where we can even have a little bit more informal way to dialogue about what's going on in Reston and what's going on with the association. So please avail yourself and make yourself available for those sessions and come on out. It'd be great to have you there. With that, I will move us to the approval of the agenda. So, if everyone here on the table has had a chance to look at the agenda, do we have a motion to approve that?
I move to approve it.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, our agenda is approved. Thank you very much. Next, on the agenda is our consent calendar. On the consent calendar are minutes for our July regular Board of Directors meeting and our August work session meeting that we had with the fiscal team. Also the committee appointments that are ongoing right now, and also the Covenants Resolution 5 update. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
And we've got a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent calendar as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes, so we have that consent calendar through. The next topic is the one I hinted at earlier. We're going to have member comments. So we invite any Reston Association member to come up and speak. We have a couple pages, I think, of those interested, and we welcome your comments. If you do think, again, that maybe your comment might be better spent at next month's meeting or the meeting after that, there'll be no offense taken if I call your name and you say next time. But if you do want to speak now, again, it's perfectly wonderful. You'll have 3 minutes, and if you could really keep to that, we'd appreciate it, because again, if everyone spoke here tonight, we'll all be here quite late, but that's okay. So, on this list, I'll just run down from the order it was signed in, and our first comment is from Carol Molesky. Did I say that right? Carol? Okay. Carol, if you could come up to the mic, and is it on? Okay, we even have the first quiz. You have to push that little button here.
Hello. There we go. How's that?
Can we do it?
Okay.
Does it bend?
No,
Oh my
I'm
God.
just too short. How about if I go like that? That's perfect. It's okay.
All right, Carol, this does not count against your time because I'm learning this new equipment. So if you could state Carol, once you're there, if you could state your name and your address, and
Sure.
then
My
your
name's
comment.
Carol Molesky. I live at 11410 Reston Station Boulevard, the Aperture Building over by the Wheelie Metro, which is great Reston property. I am the former coach of the South Lakes golf team for seven past years. I've lived in Reston 28 years. As part of the community, I'm very involved in the athletic community, have been a previous member of Hidden Creek, coached at South Lakes. I also coach at Herndon, and I coach the some of the kids programs in Reston tennis as well. So I just wanted to say that how important this community property, this open space is to us. It's very important to the kids and the community and the people who are raised here, because we need the use of those facilities to provide that for our athletic teams, for play areas, for a variety of things. The golf team, it's very difficult to get somewhere to play and to have those kids play. Even with the numerous tennis courts in Reston, we still have to rent things, pay for those facilities. The open space is critical to the young kids growing up here and using that land, and it's part of their lives, and it supports the community. So that's been an ongoing issue for a number of years through Rescue Reston. And just so people are aware, Fairfax County does not pay for sports athletic activities. They only pay for 5% of the sports activities for anybody in the county. That only includes transportation and coaches' fees. And if you want to know how much we get paid, it's a joke, okay? I make probably 10 cents an hour for the hours. You do it because you love the community and you want to see those good kids have a good coach. So the coaching staff, they give their time almost as like a volunteer to do that. The rest of that money is all raised by boosters, by donations, everything. We go to the community, the parents pay, the community pay. And I want people to know, we don't get money from Fairfax County Education or the local or we raise our own money. We support our own activities, our own sporting things. And I just think that's really critical when you remember, and going to places, that's like self-funded. And so we need support of the community and the area and the property and that open space. And it's good for all the kids in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Connie Hartke. Connie, if you could come up. Connie, are you here? There she is. She's in the back, hiding in the back. Connie, if you could state your name and address, And then, again, I know you'll be speaking later, so if you could keep to 3 minutes right now,
less.
2 minutes now,
Yep.
thank you.
Connie Hartke, 2201 Quartermaster Lane, Reston. I just wanted to speak to help the newcomers, as you mentioned also, Andy, but newcomers to the RA board meeting. Actually, the people presenting are addressing the board. It's not a time for questions and conversations unless the board specifically asks you to participate. So I just wanted to let you know we so appreciate you being here. It says a lot. I want to thank anyone who's recently donated. Anyone who runs a nonprofit knows how unusual it is to get contributions when you haven't specifically asked for them, and yet we've been getting them. It's wonderful. Thank you for being here tonight, coming out in the rain, and just your presence here is good enough. Thank you. And I will look at you for a moment. Yay.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. All right. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah, so again, just thank you, Connie, and just to reiterate what Connie said, so the normal flow for those who aren't normally at a board meeting is member comments. Every member can speak up to 3 minutes. If they're part of a group, we do up to 5 minutes. And then once we get into the presentations of the agenda, it's more you're more watching the session go on. The board members will speak, but unless called upon by the chair, it's really more of a discussion between board members. So that's just, I think, the point Connie was making, and thank you for your working with us on that, just to keep the meeting moving. With that, I will try and keep the meeting moving by asking Barbara Helmick. So Barbara, again, if you could state your name and address, and then your comment. Thank you.
Barbara Helmick, 11425 Night Star Way, Reston. I actually wasn't prepared to speak, but I followed Carol. I've been a member of Hidden Creek since 1995. I first moved to Reston when they broke up the phone company. I kind of stumbled into Reston with some friends who were transferred down here. In 1990, I was transferred to Philly. When I came back to Reston. I'm single, and when you are single and you get transferred back and forth, you need to build a network. And I made a decision in 1995, get an MBA or join Hidden Creek. It was probably the best decision I ever made. There are a lot of people in this room who I've met and become friends with generationally. And we talk about live, work, play. Well, let's keep it that way for Reston. There's plenty of places for children. As Carol talked, there's plenty of fields. But tell me this, other than a church community, where can you drop in and find people you know and socialize with and build relationships and friendships that can last generations? I have friends that moved away to Florida, whatever, we're still in touch. One of our families just was flooded out in South Carolina. We're reaching out to them. So just consider, when you're talking about, just blow away the golf course and put up a park. Pay paradise and put up a parking lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Nellie Truitt. Nellie, are you available? No? Okay, thank you. And how about Gray Wells? Thank you, Gray. Again, if you could state your name and your address and then your comment. Thank you so much for coming up tonight.
Thank you. My name is Gray Wells. My husband and I live at 11773 North Shore Drive. My parents, brothers, and I moved to Reston in 1970. We were the first owners of our townhouse in Charter Oak Cluster, which is adjacent to Hidden Creek Country Club. We moved here because my parents wanted, we bought into the Reston ideal. The diversity of people, the open space, the trails. Can't tell you the number of walks my mother and I have walked around the golf course from Charter Oak, Golf Course Island, up to the country club. We bought into the master plan. We bought into the restrictions and covenants. We bought into Bob Simon's vision of Reston. My father, David T. Wells, worked in covenants here at ROA for 19 years. My mother, Mary LaRue Wells, is an artist, and she was involved in the art community here in Reston. My brothers all played sports. I played tennis. We lived in Reston. We love Reston. Wheelock bought and paid for Hidden Creek as an open space, and I believe it should stay that way. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention is we love Reston so much that my husband and I, when we moved back into the area, moved back into Charter Oak to be in Reston because we love it. Thanks.
Thank you. And next we have Moira Callahan. Hi, Moira.
Awesome. Okay, great. I need to see. My name is Moira Callahan. Live on 112 and 3 Longwood Grove Drive. I'm going to start out by I'm making a request tonight. I wanted to start out by sharing a little bit about myself. My mother had ALS and died a couple of years ago, and prior to that, I cared for her. She sometimes used a wheelchair, and we took her around. If you've ever pushed a wheelchair, it's very difficult. But she loved going out, and it really made her final years wonderful. My dad is 88, and he is starting to show his age, and walking is a challenge for him, long-distance walking. He has fear of falling. And last week, he went to Mackinac Island, and I don't know if you know what that is, but it's an island that has no cars on it. And I suggested that he rent a motor scooter so that he could see the island, because he wouldn't be able to walk and see it. And I can't tell you how excited he was to come back and share with me how wonderful that experience was for him to be able to go places on that island that he wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I got to thinking, we live in a really wonderful area with a lot of trails. And my idea or request for you, if it hasn't already been explored, is to please look into providing to our to our people in our community, doesn't have to even be older, mobility scooters for Reston. Older adults are the least active segment of our population and are likely to spend less time outdoors than any other group. Research has shown that simply spending time in natural landscapes can provide wellness and mental health benefits. Many older people experience difficulty walking, as I said, and have a fear of falling. But from 2020, people ages 65 and over will be the largest segment of Fairfax County's population. Reston's founding goals state that it should be possible for residents to age in place, that the widest choice of opportunity leisure time be made available, and that the importance and dignity of each individual be the focal point of all planning. Reston's deed states that every member shall have an easement of use and enjoyment over the common area. That means every member. It shall be the policy of the association to foster the fullest use of the lands, and I think this should include mobility scooters. The cost of a scooter is about $2,200 to $3,200. I spoke to the owner of one of the rentals up at Mackinac Island, and he says it's an extremely profitable business. And he has 11 scooters, and they're often rented out all the time. It takes about 8 hours if it's totally uncharged to charge it back up, which could be an overnight. You have to just worry a little bit about hills. So I don't know Reston's pathways at all from a larger standpoint, but you just have to be aware of hills. Two possible locations. One is maybe putting something near Walker Nature Center, and maybe something by the Central Services Facility so that they could access the WOND. So I'm going to hand out my handout, and I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask if you have a URL or something, but you probably have it right on there, so thank you.
I don't, but
Oh.
I can send you.
All right, thanks. That's okay. Thank you, Moira. Okay. All right, while she's passing that around, next on the list is Patty Lenz. Patty, you there? Hi, Patty. Oh, boy. So Patty, again, if you could just mention your name and address and then your comment. Thank you.
For those people that don't know me, I just want to say that every person on this board does know me. And for what I'm going to say, it's very difficult for me, and it has nothing to do with anything else you're going to hear this evening. So please bear with me. I'm stating this as a comment to the Board Operations Committee with the intent that I was going to bring it before this Board of Directors and the Board Operations Committee. It just so happened that the meeting of this board was first. So here goes. The purpose of this letter is to address the rejection of my application to serve on the Election Committee. On September 10, 2018, I was interviewed by this committee for the second time. The first time was earlier this year when I applied for two committees, the Election Committee and the 55-plus Committee. I was confirmed to serve on the latter. During both interviews, I expressed some of my concerns regarding the Election Committee. I also have spoken at the March 2018 Board of Directors meeting. At this time, I pointed out specific incidents and presented hard copy relating to these concerns. As I have stated many times, I am an outspoken individual, but I believe my tone has always been respectful, and I have always defended my statements with supporting information. At the September 10 interview, I made it clear that no matter what view I may express within the committee, there is time for discussion, then a vote, and no matter what the outcome, all members are then obligated to uphold that decision. At this time, I am requesting the review of the decision denying my confirmation to serve on the Election Committee for the following reasons. It is implied that I am incapable of working with others, nor capable of creating a positive working environment within the Election Committee, but they have not presented to me with a reasonable, concise statement as to why this assumption. I am deeply offended, questioning my ability to understand the function of the Election Committee, suggesting I sit in on a committee meeting, which I have already done and previously stated, thus implying I may have trouble learning. A prerequisite to serve on this committee, or any committee, does not exist. Only for relevant experience and interested in serving are the only questions on the application form for any committee. Such generality opens to a wide range of dialogue, which suggests to me the question of why the committee has denied my confirmation. Unfortunately, under the Reston Association governance, this committee has not provided, and I quote, an environment that fosters volunteering, work with a sense of fairness, or meet challenges to advance the community. I submit that I have not been considered fairly, as outlined in the committee's resolution 2. Though some of my statements may not agree with the board, it is not the function of this committee to render decisions based on opinions, but only on, and I quote out of the resolution, approach to decision-making. I further suggest this committee tries to control the number of volunteers willing to serve by its unwillingness to fill open positions. The Election Committee has only 5 members on it, has a maximum of only 5 members. Currently, only 3 members serve on this committee. By not filling open positions, the committee limits discussion and maximum opportunity of the decision-making that 60,000 plus residents are entitled. I feel this committee reflects a bias to individuals that question the governance of Reston. As with any volunteer, their service should be welcomed and encouraged. The thought of bringing fresh ideas that may represent views within the Reston community can only encourage positive discussion. As a 28-year Reston resident, I want to give back to the community by serving on committees that I was not able to participate in past years. I hope you will reconsider your decision and allow me the opportunity to do so. I just want to say that I take elections for this board very, very seriously. They govern everything that happens in Reston. They support our master plan, which I think is wonderful. I have great respect for everyone on this board. I go to planning and zoning meetings. I listen to Larry Butler, who's been outstanding in everything that he's done for the Reston Committee. But I honestly feel that as a volunteer in Reston, because I have been outspoken and questioned things about the Election Committee, that they wanted to hear my voice. And this is why I am here. I mean no disrespect to the community nor the people on this board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patty. We appreciate your engagement, and we continue to appreciate it, and we look forward to working with you. Next is Jim Bussey. No? Okay. Denise O'Connell. Pass. And Martin Hunt. Pass. Okay, thank you, Martin. And Burton Philip Shores. Pass. Robin Hogan. David Settlemeyer. Pass. Okay. And Lori Warren. Lori? Pass. Okay, thank you, Lynn. And I think that's it on the list. So if anyone, would anyone else,
There might be a list, fresh list.
was there a fresh list? Okay. Is anyone else in the room, just by show of hand, interested? No? Okay, sir? If you'd come up to the mic at the front, here.
State your
And
name.
state your name. No, you're the last one on the list if you'd like to speak. 3-minute speak. You are. We're at now. Yes? So again, if you just state your name and address and 3-minute comment, thank you.
I thought the presentation started at 7 o'clock.
Member comments first and the presentations come. Connie and others have spoken. One thing we did talk about was that if a comment was going to be similar to what we think Connie might present during her 20-minute Rescue Reston presentation, or also be similar to one of the Wheelock presentation, that we might wait to a future time for member comments. We've had some, and some people have decided to pass to wait for a future meeting. As tonight's information only.
Hi, my name is Ron Weber. I live here 41 years. I'm a traffic engineer for almost my whole lifetime. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Committee probably 40 years or so. Before that, the Transportation Committee. And this was a big surprise when this bridge was proposed, say, in the last year. Actually, I had back bridges between Reston Avenue and Fairfax County Parkway way back when nobody wanted to do it. We had a different administration and so forth. That's when we had empty land. Also back a crossing between Reston Parkway and Wheelie Avenue. Again, that was when we had empty land and there was a need for some kind of a crossing without a full interchange. However, to do that today is absolutely absurd. There are buildings there, the cost, estimated cost, I think the last I saw is $178 million or something like that. I don't know if that's for the construction or getting the land and so forth. What you're doing, if you're going to do that, you're going to clog up the intersection of Sunrise Valley and Soapstone. I don't know if you've seen the numbers. I have seen the numbers. You're moving congestion spots from one place to another, gaining very little for that money. I've appeared before the supervisors and others on some minor improvements, which would cost almost nothing, and they were rejected. But they seem to think nothing of spending a fortune on this project, proposed project, where the main beneficiary is a carpetbagger. If you remember what a carpetbagger is, well, they go from north to south. This one's from the west coast to the east coast. Many of the citizens here have participated as volunteers for many, many years, and we were here to protect our open space. That's what the plan was. When I studied about Reston in graduate school in 1966, it was a model community. It was just starting. And when I had an opportunity to work in the Washington, D.C. area, I was living up in Connecticut, and I traveled to Europe almost every second year. My parents came from Europe, and you could see where the urban planning was nodes of small cities and a lot of green space in between. And that green space keeps on being maintained. They build. I think all these previous speakers gave me their 3 minutes.
Well played, sir, but I'm afraid not in the rules, sorry. So if you could wrap up, but thank you. No, I think a lot of us appreciate some of the open space comments you're making, so.
Well, you know, you can talk a lot, but without action. This is a very political county, and politics have overruled common sense. And I suggest this development, I used to live in Fairway Apartments when I first came here. It's the only place which would take my German Shepherd. Maintain the open space till you die, and I live on one of these lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Harlan. All right, don't forget your hat. And thank you for coming out tonight. And thank you all so much for coming out, and again, your comments. They are, again, the input we get is how we try and represent you as members of the association, so thank you for that. At this stage, we're going to transition on to, again, welcome to my fellow board members. Hello. We're going to talk just real briefly. What we decided to do is if any board member wants to make a quick comment about their board liaison assignment, we're assigned to different committees and work groups. And I thought we would just go around the table and see if anyone wanted to give the rest of us an update on their liaison assignment. Julie.
I do, thank you. Lakes, Docks, and Boats Working Group, which we had the charter approved in the end of March, and we got to a full-up staffed working group in July that represents both lakefront and non-lakefront members. And tonight, thank you to my fellow board members for approving our chair, Steve Taylor, who is a non-lakefront member. And I mention that because the purpose of the group is not just to address enforcement issues of boats and docks, but also to address making sure that our members have access and enjoyment of our lakes. We're very proud of our lakes as being part of our amenities. So I wanted to make note of that. One of the immediate tasks that the group had been given by the board to tackle was whether or not we expected that any of the recommendations would entail a referendum to modify our deed. And when such an occurrence would take place, we need X number of months to plan and to cause that referendum to get in our cycle with public hearings and whatever. And thus the request for us to report back to the board in November. So I wanted to give an update that the working group does not anticipate any need for a referendum, which I think is quite good news. And as such, we will be coming back in November with some of our other recommendations, but I did want to give that update. And I also want to welcome Kathy for being willing to help be the liaison on that group. She's a lakefront owner, and I am a non-lakefront owner, so that's great. So that's that piece. And then, since I have the floor at the moment, I wanted to take this time to acknowledge that I am a member of Hidden Creek Country Club, and I live on Reston National. So.
All right, thank you, Julie. Does anyone else? Ben?
Hi, my name is Ben Ayer. I'm an at-large director and a fiscal committee liaison. As you know, right now is an important time for the fiscal committee because the fiscal committee is our eyes and ears and the primary advisor to the board on budget issues, on all financial matters, and one of them is the assessment. So as you know, we are in the cycle to create the budget for 2019. And right now we are in draft 2 of the budget, which will be presented by the staff tonight. Draft 1 was presented by the staff, and then in the August meeting, together with the fiscal committee, as well as the board, we gave staff direction to go back and work on it further, considering that there was a $39 increase in the assessment. And I have to say the staff has done a very good job in bringing it down further. Of course, we're in draft 2 tonight. We'll have draft 3 next month, and we'll finally pass the budget in November. But I wanted to give a shout out to the fiscal committee members who are very knowledgeable and experienced. and are our eyes and ears to the board when the staff comes up with the budget as their wish list. The fiscal committee goes and ensures that they provide the proper checks and balances. As well as I wanted to give a shout out to the staff for following the direction of the board and coming up with favorable options for us that'll give us a platform for us to work with for further drafts. And as well as to my fellow board members who have been very cognizant of the rising assessments and want to keep it down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Anyone else want to speak? John?
Yes, I'm John Mooney, and I'm liaison to the Multimodal Transportation Committee. And I want to thank them for help they've recently given me at the board's request in an analysis of the Reston Network Analysis final report, an analysis by Fairfax County made public in March of this year, which was supposed to study the impact of and ways to mitigate that impact of the new traffic generated by new development in the transit station areas. And the specific thing we are studying, there are many questions we have about, the board has and I have, about the Reston Network Analysis final report. But the one we focused on is the failure of that study to model the impact of the new traffic from the TSAs on those areas of Reston outside the TSAs. So their congestion analysis was exclusively about the TSA areas and the areas immediately adjacent to it. So I want to acknowledge the help of the Multimodal Transportation Commission in working on that, and also as the representative of the board to the Reston Special Transportation District Advisory Board, which is a Fairfax County board, I'm going to write a letter about this concern.
Okay, thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay.
Quick comment?
Oh, yes,
Yep.
sure. Thank you, Sridhar.
So we have a few issues on the table from a Reston perspective. Budget is obviously one of them. I was the treasurer last year, and I'm looking forward to diving into the details in the coming weeks of the budget and looking to see where the costs and all the different items are. Hidden Creek Country Club, obviously we're going to listen to that today, and we will be focusing on that when we need to in greater detail, and then the density issue. So those are the items. I have no specific update, but ready to jump into some of those things.
Thank you, Sridhar.
I will be quiet.
Thank you. All right, so thank you, board members. And again, it's great to have everybody here. Again, we're still waiting for Eric to join us, and he must have been held up, but we will continue moving forward. And at this stage, we're on agenda item E, the Design Guidelines Public Hearing. So I would like to call this public hearing to order, and at this stage, bring Anna and Richard up to the podium to kind of lead us through the public hearing. So our Director of Covenants and our Chairperson of the Design Review Board.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Anna Maroon.
Richard Nolan, 2216 Wake Robin Lane.
12001 Sunrise Valley.
There you go. No, as the chair, we've been working on this for about the last year and a half. I would be more than happy to read all 147 pages to you. But in the interest of brevity, we held our own public hearing last month, I guess it was. And Anna can synopsize what we did as primarily the process without specifically changing any guidelines, really.
So we were here in June to discuss with you a couple of resolutions that had some amendments and the guideline edits that were the way it had the design review board proposed some amendments.
Can I say, can you hear back? You need to get a little close to the mic, Anna.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So in June, we came to the board to discuss two resolution changes and the proposed amendments that were proposed by the Design Review Board. In July, we had the hearing at the full DRB meeting. This is the last stop, basically, for the approval of the design guidelines amendments. There was no content change in the guidelines. The only two changes were to the cluster properties and single-family properties were for the DRB to delegate authority to staff for certain elements that were for applications that were pretty much straightforward and common. So they delegated the review to staff. For the cluster standards, basically that review went from panel to consultation with 2 DRB members. And also for the clusters and single families, there was a checklist originally on the guideline itself that was taken out because we now have a comprehensive checklist on each application, on each DRB application. So those were the only changes. Now this is the last step in the process to allow our members to make any comments if they have any.
So, thank you. Does any board member have any questions? So again, what we heard, again, none of the actual guidelines changing, just the process and the pacing changing, some things going from panel to staff or.
No, consultation to staff.
Consultation and.
Consultation to
just
staff.
And then the other one was.
Panel to consultation.
So just moving it down one rung.
Right.
That maybe speeds it up.
It's really for the only reason was to streamline the process, to allow quicker processing, to expedite the process for the members.
And certainly, we've heard comments that with the amount and volumes, the pacing, it's important, and this will be an important step to do that, so thank you. So, I think I saw Ben's hand up first, so if it's okay, we'll start with Ben.
So in the June meeting, I'd asked some questions with the intention of making these guidelines friendly towards homeowners, essentially with the idea that some of these violations, the way they are discovered after sometimes years and decades, and are quite onerous on homeowners to actually go ahead and correct them after the fact, and often at a very inconvenient time, such as trying to sell their home. I would like to know what is it that you've done since June to make this friendlier towards homeowners, where perhaps those situations can be mitigated in a way that is, in fact, the homeowners can handle. So for example, we've heard recently as well that sometimes they have thousands, if not multiple thousands of dollars that they have to spend towards that. I know there's some things that are done in order to give them more time to fix that situation. I'll also offer some other recommendation that you gave, which I've been telling to some homeowners, is for the clusters to come forward and update their standards. But I don't think that all the residents are fully aware of what this entails and how to do it within a given period of time. And frankly, I'm very discouraged in order to even start along those in that path. So will you address that, please?
Yes, so for the first item that you mentioned, I don't think it necessarily goes to guideline changes because those are violations that are a result of resale disclosure inspections. So those violations really are addressed more on the use and maintenance side of our department, so it wouldn't really require guideline changes. And we are tackling those from a different standpoint in terms of how do we expedite the process of violations that are a result of resale disclosure documents. And we've discussed a little bit with the Design Review Board, how can we expedite anything that might come out of that might require a DRB application. But most of those are really use and maintenance violations, which is not really design related. And we're trying to tackle that, but it is really more, if there are violations that are use and maintenance related, there is still a process that has to go through, and I think it's something that we've had even a conversation with John, separately, in terms of, I think that is a decision of the board, in terms of what is it that the board would want our department to cite, in terms of how much, what items. So I think it's a bigger conversation, but it's not necessarily something that is only within the purview of the design review board. And I would welcome maybe having, if possible, a focus group out of the board to maybe tackle some of these issues, because it is a bigger issue. And we do think that there is a discussion that should be had, but it's not necessarily a requirement that comes out of a change out of the design guidelines.
Thank you, and I think that's a great idea.
I don't know if that answers your
And I think
question,
with one of the board members' interest at the end of the table, we might even have a chairperson. Did even get that? So the next one, the next one. Yeah, well played, Ben. So then, I think Julie had her hand up.
Yes, I'm going to put my first thing, why I raised my hand, second, and I'll address the other item first. So to your point, Ben, and to what Anna shared, Kathy with Covenants and myself, DRB liaison, and comments that we've gotten in the last number of months and more about clusters and covenants and guidelines. Even last night in the first listening session for North Point, we had that very question come up about how might we facilitate, how might we do things a bit better to support covenants and design guidelines. I can attest to Richard and Anna's point that we've been working on this for about a year and a half, and these are great changes that we've got proposed here. It's a step in the right direction, and we're anticipating being able to do more, but we have to walk, crawl before we walk. And our thought was that at the end of the listening session series that we go through this month, that some of the board members could reconvene, talk through some ideas, get with Anna. Maybe focus groups are the right answer, not quite sure, but certainly member service, customer service, all those things, easy to do business with kind of things that are important to us, and I expect those. My second part was to move to accept.
I think we still have some comments going. So,
Just a process question. So now, assuming that this gets passed when Julie makes a motion, how do you inform the public of the change of these new things that are 140 pages?
We usually publish something on our news, and we put a note on the website. That's usually what the process is in terms of information that is distributed out to the members.
You did that with the public hearing as well.
Mm-hmm.
We publicized it then too. But perhaps a Cliff Notes version.
So
of it.
that's kind of what I'm thinking. So basically, one would not find out about all of these things until they made the first phone call to you guys and say, how do I do this?
As far as what the process would be for the application.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's gonna get published on the website.
Sure.
Okay, Larry?
Something Anna and I talked about too, related to this event, is when people, for those people that know or who know they're gonna sell their homes, we talked about doing an upfront inspection, so it's not done right before the time of sale when the disclosure document is done. So if you know it, like, hey, I'm gonna sell in 6 months, I'm gonna start getting things ready, of actually asking for an inspection. And there's some staff time going through the files and actually going out and conducting the inspection, but it gives people a lot more time to kind of process that rather than under the pressure of the 14 days. So that's something Anna and I started a conversation about a couple of weeks ago. We want to continue that.
No, that sounds like a great topic for the workshop. So, and John?
I think I know the answer for this question from my read of the new revised resolution, but some may be concerned to hear that jurisdiction is being granted to staff to hear some issues. The rights of appeal are still preserved in this ordinance.
Correct. So if staff is reviewing an application, they can, a member can still request that review be pushed to consultation or panel or to whatever.
Right.
And also, if there's an affected party to an application, it automatically gets kicked to panel. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it stops with staff. they can always ask for a higher level of review.
Appeal rights are preserved.
Absolutely.
Correct.
That's an important point.
Absolutely.
Before I call the question, I'd like to ask if anyone else has a comment or a question for Anna or Richard. I'm going to stick with the board members, if that's okay. Sorry, sir. Good idea. There might be a lot.
So can I so move?
So I would love to call the I'd love to have a motion.
I would like to approve the changes as detailed tonight.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Second.
Okay. We have a second, I guess, by Kathy. So with that, any further discussion? I'd like to call the question. All those in favor of the motion to move to adopt the amendments as proposed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Nay. So Ben has a nay. Any abstentions? Okay, so the motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Richard and Anna.
Thank you.
All right, now for what we're all been waiting for.
The main show.
The main show of the evening, well, one of the two main shows of the evening. We'd like to move to agenda item F, Hidden Creek Country Club update by Wheelock Communities. So if Steve Caniglio, if you could come up and then maybe introduce your team. And we've got about 20 minutes for this board to be edumacated.
Wow, I don't know if 20 minutes even would come close.
If you do your
Well,
best.
I'll try and trim my 3-hour thing down to 20 minutes. So my name is Steve Caniglio. I'm the regional partner of Wheelock Communities. And as everyone knows, we've purchased Hidden Creek Country Club. Wheelock has a controlling interest in Charter Oak Apartments, as well as the 29 acres between American Dreamway and Reston Avenue as of yesterday. I think that's also called the Fannie Mae property, but that's now part of our holdings. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for coming and hearing us, and I appreciate this is informational, and I see a lot of yellow shirts. So I've offered this to Connie before. I'm happy to come meet with you guys as well, and that meeting can be informational, or it can be a workshop. Whatever format you guys choose, that's fine. So with that, I'll introduce some of our team members that are here. We have Dan Green, principal at Wheelock. We have Stephanie and Peter and John. They're part of our planning team. So what we did on our planning team is we actually brought folks in. John's from Phoenix, and Stephanie and Peter are here from Alexandria. So a lot of different opinions. And I know you guys have heard of our focus group meetings that we had. I'll let those guys talk a little bit more about those. We tried to include folks from all different pieces of the community, including Rescue Reston, Reston Association, the Chamber of Commerce, and just get them in a room and say, okay guys, if Hidden Creek changed, what would that land use look like? With no preconceived notions of what it would look like. And I know the Rescue Reston people don't agree that we didn't have any preconceived notions, but I will tell you that we did not. So I have some slides, and I wish I could read that far, but I cannot. So what we wanted to do today here is engage the community. Oh, thank you. We wanted to present a vision of what we want to do, not present a plan. This is about a vision. We appreciate Reston's a special place, and you guys have a process, and part of the process is working with the community to figure out what we're trying to do means. So with that, what we've done is we've accepted stewardship of this land, and in looking at all the potential public benefits that could come from this land, we found 3 overarching themes. This is where I have to read because I don't have glasses. First, right now, Hidden Creek, as you know, is 164 acres of private open space. We want to embrace the whole concept of public open space, and not just public open space, but usable public open space. So our first tenant is public open space. Our second tenant that we're trying to corral is what environmental benefits are out there that we can gather, whether it's stream restoration, whether it's habitats, whatever it happens to be. We want to take a look at the environment and how we can make it better. Golf courses traditionally are not the best thing for the environment, so how can we make it better? And the third thing is we want to commit to an appreciable percentage above the county ordinance of both affordable and workforce housing. We want to create more housing for everybody. Well, that's obviously an obvious thing, but you know, Reston's about inclusion. Reston's about people in the whole spectrum of our greater community. So how can we get all those people and keep them here in Reston? So with that, I will turn this over to John. Oh, sorry.
Then Larry, if you could start that, please.
Do you want to talk? John's going to partially narrate some of this. So.
About community like no other. I came here 35 years ago to study Reston for another project of mine and realized that you have a place that is special. And you of this land not come and try to thrust a plan down before you, but to use these elements that we are studying now, along with community input, to see what might be if in fact there is a change. We understand there is no right. We understand that the comp plan has to change. We understand there's a long road to toe here. But what we're doing is, I think tonight, trying to walk you through really a point in time in our process with the hopes that we will still move forward with this. And so this little clip is just an evolution of some of the ideas that the focus group has helped us with, ideas that we have brought to the table, some what-ifs. And I think, as Steve pointed out, it's all focused on trying to make this land much more community-based and perhaps open to all. So Larry, you got to go out of that. A little techno problem here. All right, so Peter and I are going to quickly walk through some of this work to date. When we first came here, we did our homework. We understand there are at least 3 important documents that really help us understand the history of how Reston has come to what it is today and where it is going as a roadmap to the future. Bob Simon's original 7 planning principles and the original master plan. Your essential elements of Reston, which you created in 2010, and the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan planning principles. The first one and the second one, we've written a rather lengthy white paper kind of in response to where we see ourselves with those. But because we're here before you tonight, we wanted to kind of wrap ourselves around the essential elements of Reston. So this handout we can make available, we'll get it maybe to Connie and she can post it so you understand that. But these are your essential elements of Reston. I highlighted a copy of this, not to kind of show off that we've read it, but to really help you understand that I would say we are beginning to understand. We're not fully understanding because we're all here, but we understand these elements such as environmental stewardship. So in the plan that we hope to create, the vision, we talk about 100 acres of land converting from private golf to a park like no other that may be a mix of great amenities, unmet needs within the community, a commitment to design excellence and sustainability. The streams that run through us are degraded, and we're looking at perhaps restoration of somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 linear feet. Someone talked about networking of friends earlier on. We want to create several community gathering places within this park so that it isn't a private enclave, but it is open to all to meet and greet and gather as friends. The trees, we talk about the trees and your essential elements. We've charted all these trees in the plans that we're beginning to look at, not only saving those clusters, but extending the tree growth, growing more trees as part of it. And maybe one of the most important things is proposing ending the taking of Lake Ann water to water the golf course. Commitment to the arts, one of your other elements. The developer is truly committed to the creation of public art, but this isn't kind of the thought about let's just put something there to check that off. How can we create a place where sculpture, where public art sits beautifully in the landscape, and also how can it be looked at into the future? So it's not just a one-shot thing. It's the beginning of a growth of the collection of great public art, which is clearly part of what Reston is about. The commitment of art, the art of architecture. I am an architect. We do work all over the world. I came here as a young student to study the more, what often is thought about as some of the more brutalistic concrete work, which is really the essential part of some of the architecture here, but that isn't all of it. And there is a commitment on the part of the development team, at least, to look at the art of architecture. And then venues for other cultural activities that might be part of the park area itself. Accessibility, we look at adding 2.5 or 3 to 3.5 roughly miles of new path and trails. The Blue Trail goes through, an RA trail goes adjacent to this property. And clearly with the current private golf paths, some of that can now become great, truly public pathways open to all. The potential of a shuttle system to, say, the town center. The idea of creating more clusters like Reston is known, but ones that are built for walkability, not drivability, if drivability is actually a word. And then also our understanding of adherence to Reston on foot. Planning and design excellence. We certainly endorse that all the neighborhoods that might be created become part of your association. That, as we've already begun to demonstrate, that this not be a plan that's just created in private, but a very open public planning process. It's one that we already started with the focus group, and it's one we want to continue throughout. The built environment being impacted lightly or low impact development is something that is music to my ears. We believe in looking deeply at the topography and not trying to fight it, not trying to fight the trees, the stream paths, etc., and looking at where the land wants building to occur. Commitment to reinforcing Reston's forward-thinking architecture, the art of architecture. distributing density so that the transit systems in here are closer to home sites, and then compatible building heights with adjacent neighbors. Some have suggested here, and I'm not saying rightly or wrongly, to dig deep, build tall. We realize that adjacent homes here are single-family dwellings. And so putting a mid-rise or high-rise in the middle, say, of the clubhouse site just doesn't seem right to us as it relates to fulfilling some of that kind of respect of those adjacent to this property. There's a whole palette of recreational amenities that some have suggested, some we're testing out. Indoor tennis facilities, a trailhead at the WOND Trail, something we call the Hub, which we see as a great community gathering place for lifelong learning, small outdoor amphitheater, splash park, dog park, etc. This is a list that perhaps is one that might need to be edited. There may be things that should come and go. That's all part of the public process, but this is a list that is emerging. Housing opportunities, Steve talked about that. The idea that maybe we look at senior memory care, some form of active adult clusters, the idea of live-work and other innovative housing types that perhaps you don't have here to really fulfill some of those early visions of living and working here for life in your own neighborhood. Peter is now going to take us through some of the more detailed elements of the land itself.
Thank you, John. I get to talk about the park to start out with. I'm a landscape architect, and this first diagram really focuses on the park. The green spaces are that 100 acres of park. The trail system is the 3.5 miles of new trails. You see the linkages from the WOND Trail, the connection to Lake Ann to the north, the connection to Reston Town Center to the west. We think there'd be a fabulous opportunity for connection up the power line or the gas line easement, connecting north and south. And I'm going to explain the logic of this plan because it may not be immediately evident. So as you look at the overall property, there are a series of ridges and highlands, and then there are a series of stream valleys. The stream valleys are the places that predominantly the golf course is occurring in. There's a large one in the south, large one in the north. This property is at the headwaters of Colvin Run, and as part of the headwaters, it's very important in terms of the overall quality of the overall watershed. So what we did was we looked at the environmentally sensitive places, we set them aside, we looked at places and ways that we could create overall connections throughout the community, and we created those connections, creating corridors, linear parks that connected north to south. And then we looked at the leftover space, and that's the place that homes could be located. So as we look further, this is an example. This shows the planned or completed stream restoration projects in the lighter blue, and then in the darker color, we show where we would, as a part of this concept, improve the stream valley. There's also a red asterisk on here that shows a Fairfax County proposed stormwater management facility that would help to take care of some of the flooding that's happening along Sunset Hills Road. We also looked at the relationship of the property and those areas that I said were potentially for community development and the adjoining parcels of land. We will plan to be sensitive to view sheds from adjacent neighbors, and we're using a cluster approach. My first time designing in Reston was in 1983 for a piece of property called St. John's Woods. It's at the corner, or Jonathan's Keep. It's at the corner of Temporary Road and Reston Parkway, and so that cluster design is something we're very familiar with. We've taken a look at various site photos throughout the property, and our approach is one of park-like designing in the tradition of landscape architecture, of looking at the adjacencies of communities and then creating a framework of corridor connections throughout between the new areas for homes and being respectful of the existing home areas. So that Grand Park, and really Grand Park is another name for a principal park or the central park, there'll be some name that will make sense, encompasses many elements, as you see on this slide, from that 100-acre park, but also restoration, all of the recreational amenities. We heard about the need for kids to have active recreational uses. The active recreational uses, aside from golf, will be multiplied many times over if we are able to implement this park concept. And as a part of that, it's more than a neighborhood park, but it's a signature park. And really, we will be looking for the citizens of Reston to help us design this park and to create a place that's uniquely Reston. It's not something that came from a landscape architect or an architect, but rather it's something that's truly infused with the spirit of this place. And it's world-class. And beyond that, I think there's a commitment to community partnerships, which, Steve, I know you'd like to take just a moment to speak to in terms of the way that we are engaging with neighborhoods, the way that we have created this focus work group to begin to guide our early thoughts about this. But moving forward, as we begin to design this park, we think that there are probably uses that 5 or 10 or 25 years from now, there'll be a community need for some facility within this community. And we think that parks are a great opportunity for communities to evolve over time. One of the really important parts of this process is the openness and the transparency that this design and development group brings to your community, really our community. I've been working here 35 years, in a discourse that is, as I said, open. And right now, we're very much in a listening mode, and we will continue to respond.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. 22 minutes have passed. We have rules of government.
Thank you. So as you've heard, Steve, we're at the closing moments.
If you'll indulge me, I appreciate it. So thank you.
I was there when you told us less than 6 months ago, something very different than you're telling us now.
Sir, and I understand your point. Thank you.
Extend comments.
And I'll just wrap up really quickly. I just want to mention a couple things. You know, I'd like to partner with the community, which is Rescue Reston, Reston Association. Together, let's go to staff and let's address the road from nowhere. I want to know why it's there too. You know, so together, why don't we do that? You know, we mentioned the flooding, alleviating the flooding. I think that's a good thing. John mentioned Lake Ann. You know, during drought conditions, the golf course pulls 150,000 gallons a day out of Lake Ann, just to give you a scope of what comes out of that lake. That's a lot of water. You know, as a side note, on November 10th, which is a Saturday, and you'll get more details to come, we're going to sponsor kind of a turkey trot, which is going to let folks go, and it'll be like a 5K race and run through the golf course area, and you can start to see what a special place it is and how cool it would be if we took this private open space and made it usable public open space. You know, finally, I would like to, I know John brought it up, is This park that they've thought up, this is a park that's programmed by the citizens. Ideally, the ownership of this park would be a foundation or something. It wouldn't be me, it wouldn't be Dan, it would be the community. And the community would get to decide what goes in this park. You know, obviously, there's a list of amenities that we would stock the park with, but after that, it's y'all's park. And who goes there is up to the community. So finally, I wish this were a question and answer period thing, but it isn't. So if anybody who has a question just shoots it over to Larry. Larry has my email address, and I'm sure after he edits them, I'll get an answer to everyone as quickly as possible. And once again, you know, Connie and Rescue Reston and Lynn, happy to come sit with y'all, and so we can work through this. I really appreciate the time.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. Steve, in the spirit of education and that this is an information sharing and a learning time for Restonians and especially the board, thank you so much for coming to visit with us here. I would like to extend for just a couple minutes to let any board member who has any questions be allowed to ask any questions of you and the team. So if you could stay for just a moment, I guess we'll use chairperson's prerogative there. And then certainly we'll give Connie the same due when she comes up with Rescue Reston. And I see a hand from Kathy, so Kathy, could you start us off?
I just want to make sure everyone, I live on Lake Ann. I live right next to the pump that takes water out of Lake Ann to take care of Hidden Creek.
Okay, Ven, and then Sridhar.
Yeah, so, great presentation, but I'm trying to understand your vision, but I get caught in the gateway to that vision, which is, in your vision, you don't have the original concept or usage of the land. So, at what point did that vision or that existing usage of the land and the existing form of the land not become a feasible vision or a viable existing usage of that land? Because I would think that if you're going to procure land and you're going to repurpose it, there has to be some thought that has to occur at some point, either before you procure it or due to which it's not viable anymore. So if you can help me understand, why is that not part of your presentation at all, which would mean that there is something that's stopping you from thinking along those lines. So if you can help me understand that, perhaps I can start to bridge the gap towards this part of the vision.
No, that's a very fair question. And when we first purchased Hidden Creek, the first thing we did was we spent to date about $500,000 on capital improvements to the club, and that's just this calendar year. We've spent more money this calendar year than the previous owner spent in the preceding 2 years. So we started down that path, and it's just been a challenge, and it's like an onion. Every time something happens, something else breaks. You know, I think this week we're buying a new tractor, a new roof. It's a lot of stuff. So as we looked at the asset, we said, you know, on top of everything, as stewards of the land, we have responsibility. What's the best use for this land? And you know, yes, it's a golf course today. That's absolutely true. But is a golf course the best use of the land as it relates to the greater community? And I don't necessarily think it is.
Let's give Steve a chance, but thank you. And Connie will be up soon, and we can.
The key issue here, though, is we're taking private open space, which in theory people do not have a right to just go and play on. We're taking that private open space and turning it into public open space, which everyone can enjoy. So
can we go to Sridhar and then back to you, Ben?
Okay.
So Sridhar.
Steve, thank you for the presentation. Congratulations on Fannie Mae. It looks like you guys acquired
Thank you.
that property as well, which is, so you're embedding yourself more in the community. Now, I was part of the focus group, and one of the things I raised in the first meeting was to see an analysis right? I wanted to see how you got to the conclusion that golf courses are not viable, especially in this region as well as everywhere. I know John made some initial, in the first meeting, he made some comments around that, but they were basically presentations, nothing detailed. And you and I talked about this once, Steve, as well. So I'd really like to see, some hard analysis with all the different options, right, laid out, spreadsheets, real, market research behind it, right, to show that, just to finish the thought, to show that why 18-hole golf course is not sustainable in Reston. I know you bought the property at a certain value, right? And independent of that, you have now acquired multiple properties, Charter Oaks, as well as Fannie Mae, paying much, much, much more, right? So I'm trying to now, figure out why you cannot make a golf course sustainable with all the surrounding properties also that you have purchased, keep it as an 18-hole golf course. I'd like to see the options, backed up by real, market research and analysis, right? Besides, just wet thumb in the air, golf courses don't work anymore, right?
So I have a couple pieces of the answer. The first, I'll address what we paid for some of the other assets or some of the other properties nearby. And you have to remember, you can't compare Hidden Creek to Charter Oak or even Hidden Creek to Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae is a leased 400,000 square foot building. Charter Oak is a built, leased, and occupied cash flowing apartment project. So those assets are a totally different category than Hidden Creek. Now, as far as the viability of Hidden Creek and golf, it's interesting. I actually belong to Army Navy, and I've lived in this area in some way or another since 1964. My grandparents and parents still live here, well, my parents, and I went to Stewart High School, or Justice High, as it's now called. Thank you. And I would say that I went through this exercise with Army Navy Country Club. I went through this exercise with Army Navy Country Club, and I know exactly what it costs us to redo Army Navy Country Club. And when I looked at Hidden Creek, at the end of the day, and side thing, I probably not willing to show people all our books. They're not mine to show. That being said, I know what it would cost, and then if I take that cost and then I put it on top of Hidden Creek, and then I look at how that can work. Right now we can't get folks to pay initiation fees, and we're struggling to get folks to sign up for a dues-only kind of membership. And everyone says, oh, make it better, but it's a business, and it's about cash flow, and that just doesn't make as much sense right now.
Okay. All right, again, we need to have order here. Again, thank you for being so patient. And again, Connie will be up, and we're going to have a lot of those same things soon. But let's let Steve finish answering the questions of the board. I really appreciate it. You guys are being awesome, so thank you.
So long story, as far as the numbers go, we got the new golf carts, we renovated the Roanoke room, and we're starting to put together all the little things with the club that are breaking. And in terms of beyond that much of an answer, Sridhar, I'm going to have to just get back to you in terms of spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would like to, I completely understand they're all separate purchases, acquisitions, right? But obviously you have a plan. You didn't buy something in Reston Town Center, you bought it around the golf course, right? And those developments, maybe you have some other thoughts around them and how to repurpose them. Those are all, those should, I'd like to see something.
Yeah, we also bought the Hyatt out at Dulles, and we also bought the Hyatt out at Dulles, and that's going to stay a Hyatt.
That I understand,
So-
right? I'd like to see the options laid out with all of those things for possibilities that you can, that you can basically think about with those properties. I completely get golf courses has to stand on its own, but I think there is a viable option. You have to look at different business models, not just members only. Initiation, I'd like to see the spreadsheet, if you actually have something that says, if this is a public golf course, what does it look like? If I repurpose it in other ways, assuming an 18-hole golf course, what does it look like? And that's how I do acquisition, so I'd love to see the same analysis.
Thank you, Sridhar, thank you, Steve. And Ben, you had a follow-up.
So the follow-up I had was, I think you've mentioned it a few times now, making it from private land to public use. And I don't think, personally, when I think about it, it is not aligned with the way I would imagine my backyard to be repurposed from being something private to public. I would imagine to be fair to the residents around there, but that's what they would also think. As well as when you talk about meeting places, networking places, I think you start to lose your audience a little bit, because I personally do not align with that, because I do not see the merit in that. But I think if you can show, at least from everything you've said, answering Sridhar's question, I feel that perhaps it's financially viable, but perhaps there are other alternatives to that which you see as perhaps more beneficial. But to help us understand, maybe we can do some more of that analysis and look at alternatives. But one of that alternative I would like to see is how to let things remain as it is, and how does it look like?
I'll have to get back to you on that, but that's a fair question. If you look at the greater Reston and you look at how home ownership is here, I walked in one of the clusters near Lake Ann today, and which is beautiful. And it was very interesting that you have these townhouses, and then you have this common open space, and everyone in Reston can enjoy the common open space that is 3 feet from someone's house. So, when you say someone's backyard is going to change, that's actually the situation in most of Reston. It is public. It is public, and that was part of Bob Simon's vision, that this greater community can come together. But to answer your question,
Okay, we'll be, again, please, let's Steve finish. We're almost finished at this point. Are there any other comments or questions from board members? Julie?
I guess what I struggle with is, you bought a golf course. You knew it was zoned as a golf course. And yet in this presentation, Reston had 2 golf courses from its inception. So there was heritage there about that open space. And yet the conceptual presentation you gave us tonight, I don't see any acknowledgement of that golf course heritage. So I guess I wonder about that part. I think about the open space that those 2 golf courses represent. I also think about people who live on a lake, who don't necessarily golf, don't necessarily boat, but they live on the lake and they enjoy the view, right? So if I were to say to those who live on a lake, I'm going to take away your lakes, which are part of our amenities that we have in Reston. I struggle with how do I make sense of these 2 pieces of the puzzle. Green space, lake space, whatever. So that's one thought. And on your membership comment, frankly, why would I join a club if the press tells me you're going to close it? So I just have a little bit of problem with that logic. But I do appreciate that you came with the presentation, focusing, spending time, as I had asked, to look at the essential elements, to look at Robert Simon's principles. I understand that. I'm just not clear where we're going, since I know you bought it zoned as a golf course. So
So Which of your questions would you like me to answer?
I didn't need a question and answer. It was simply a statement.
Nope, thank you.
This is an information.
We are learning here tonight, so thank you. Any other questions from the board? If you'll indulge me, see if it's okay, I'll just ask one. I thought a beautiful presentation and a lot of thought went into the open space and the park. Could you talk just for a couple more minutes about the developed area? You said 100 acres open, public, and then the developed area, which I guess around 60. Just high-level numbers of, and when you think about how much development, how many units, things like that, how far along are you in thinking through that? I don't remember hearing a lot about that detail in the presentation.
Well, and thank you guys for laughing, but you know, the one thing that this group did, which I've never seen anyone really do, is we designed this project absolutely backwards. We didn't design any development areas. We designed the open space, and we started with the open space. We started with the streams.
Again, please, folks, let's just give him a chance to answer. Thank you.
And that's why we don't have a plan here with streets and boxes on it for you. So to answer your question. So if you're looking at plus or minus, I'll use plus or minus, 60 acres of development land, and then you look at the densities around us, which go all the way up to about 20-some units per acre, we're way lower than that, no matter how you slice it. So, our goal here was not to build a lot of high-rises. And so our plan right now doesn't show any high-rises on it. It's a mix of products. If I was going to plan this, it would be a mix of product, and it would have townhomes, probably 2-over-2s, maybe some villas or senior component, and maybe some modicum of multifamily. But the reality in Reston is right now you have 41 high-rises that are going to be built over the next 30 years. You don't need any more high-rises right here.
That's true.
So we didn't plan that. So
Thank you.
So to answer, to box it for you, and it's a big box, and I apologize it's such a big box, but let's say it's 600 to 1,000, 600 to 999, because that'll make them feel better.
Okay, thank you. And again, what I think I heard you say, more along the lines of the existing clusters and things in that area. Is what-
Absolutely.
Well, I think I'm finished hearing that people are finished. So what I want to do is thank you, Steve, and your whole team for being here. It was very informational. It was also, I could imagine, a little intimidating to come in front of a big group of yellow shirts that might not have exactly the same opinions as you. But I think thank you for coming here, for offering to come here and inform the board of something that you as the owner of that land are thinking about. And we appreciate your time and your thoughts this evening. So thank you for coming in.
And we're happy to come back whenever you'll have us. And if you have any other questions, again, Larry, ask Larry.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks,
you,
Steve.
Steve. And with that, we can move to agenda item G and ask Connie and Lynn to come up with the Rescue Reston update. So Connie Hartke and Lynn Mulston and Sue Beckler.
No, thank you. All right, well, thank you I want to thank the board for allowing us this time to allow Rescue Reston to present. We are a grassroots, completely volunteer organization that sprang into action back in 2012, as you know, to defend the South Golf Course, Reston National, against an unprecedented attack on our open space. We have momentarily succeeded at that, although it's not over. As one of our longtime loyal friends has on his shirt, it's not over. And now we find ourselves here again defending the North Course. Our mission statement is to defend Reston's 2 golf courses from residential development, which is not in the plan, it is not in the zoning ordinance, and I'm very pleased to say that our county supervisors strengthened the wording in the comprehensive plan about Reston's 2 golf courses being open space. So Director Bitzer's absolutely right. They bought a golf course, and a golf course is what they have. Now, I want to introduce, I'm president of Rescue Reston, my chairperson for the North Course Committee, Lynn Malston, and co-chair is Sue Bethel. And Sue, many of you may know, she is co-chair of RA's, Reston Association's Environmental Advisory Committee. So she knows the environment, and she knows well what we've been through with helping people understand that a golf course is a good neighbor on the Chesapeake Bay watershed these days. I'm going to ask Sue to speak just for a few minutes. She had planned to speak earlier and was delayed, so she's going to take a few minutes now. It's important.
So, yes, I'm chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee and co-chair here. I am speaking for myself in this instant, just to make that clear. And I am here very much in support of maintaining the golf course as a golf course, as indicated in the Reston plan. As part of the EAC has presented to you our Reston State of the Environment report several times, and you are all, I'm sure, familiar with it. I'm just going to point out a couple of pieces from that Razor report that I think are applicable to the discussion this evening. Regarding air quality, the one recommended thing is to preserve Reston's urban forests and tree canopy when practicable and plant more trees. I know they say they're planting more trees. I'm not quite sure where, but they are also building a development, and you don't build a development without tearing down trees. Second, water resources. The problems with the Reston streams in general originate largely from stormwater discharges. Okay? Now, this is Colvin Run, starting just above the golf course and flowing through. As of now, that has the healthiest readings in all of Reston, of all of our streams. So the fact is the golf course has not been making the stream worse. This golf course has been making it good. Just leave that there. The proposed construction would add to the runoff, and I'm going to leave that there. The golf course has been an asset to Reston as a golf course, and frankly, I think it should remain as such.
So I think we're going to go ahead and start with our presentation in the interest of everyone. Thank everybody for staying for so long. I know we're running pretty much over time. But what we would like to do is start with our presentation for the, does this work? That's what I'm doing.
Don't you get Larry to press the button?
Oh, there it goes. Okay. So this is going to be a very quick movie that we're going to be going through. So I'm going to talk to a couple of the slides, but what we wanted to do is we wanted to start off with why this is a bad idea. Somebody's going to have to start the movie here.
Yeah, Liv, you're the one that knows how to run this.
Okay, so from real estate firm from Connecticut has teed up a really bad idea to close a golf course and cover Reston's green space with mid-rises and residences. And this is what you haven't heard, as many as 700 plus units on the golf course, and it's just what the community does not need. We've heard that. Out-of-town developers think they know what's best for Reston. So they question the choices that we've made about our community, and they throw in their vision of a park and misdirect and divide us. Wheelock's park plans translated, 2 floodplains that shouldn't be developed. So this is footwear for the Wheelock parks. So who pays for the parks, who maintains them? That's something that is not answered. So let's look at a few of just some of the impacts. Number one, Reston's charter and Fairfax County's master plan designate this as protected golf space. This is a view of the 17th hole. So we'll say it again. Reston's golf courses are protected from development. Fairfax County says so. And the community cannot tolerate unplanned development. And these will be part of the replay. But our schools can't handle the additional students that this intrusive housing project would bring, the sampling of trailers. Already congested, our roads can't handle the additional traffic. And, you know, it's already dangerous on North Shore. Huge costs and needs would be required for additional community services, infrastructure, and public safety. And the plan is a crushing blow to the Reston Way. And this is a view from, you know, where Lake Ann is. So an iconic Reston recreational space, part of the founding vision, would be lost. So let's look at a report card. Let's look at Wheelock versus Fairfax County's priorities. So here's a report card on quality schools. F.
These are the Board of Supervisors' priorities.
Yes, Board of Supervisors, yep. Safe neighborhoods, that's to be determined. No consideration of impact on public safety.
Making your backyards public.
Yes. Sustainable environment, D. We would have loss of dedicated green space. Recreational assets, a D. Lost iconic Reston golf course would be closed. And of course, the second one would be at risk. Efficient transportation, F. We would be stuck in gridlock. And we already are. Affordable taxes, to be determined. What is the economic impact? Is it going to be Fairfax County taxes that pay for this, or Reston Association dues that pay for this? Who benefits? Speculating developers who seek a big payoff for changing the rules of Reston. So since purchasing Hidden Creek, we have acres of poorly maintained property. We have unkept promises. And, you know, we ask, who do we trust? Real estate speculators from Connecticut? Or someone who had a pretty good vision about community? So it's a plan based on insulting assumptions about who we are and how we choose to live. So it's a bad swing that takes Reston out of bounds. So.
I want to thank a volunteer in this community who put that together.
Yes, yes.
It will be a few slides will get added back in that were too repetitive here. Thank you, Lynn. But that's a wonderful little movie. We'll figure out how to get on YouTube or something for your enjoyment later. You know, Reston already is a grand park. All of Reston. We have 55 miles of pathways, the WNOD trail and the Cross County Trail connecting us. And there is a nature walk. Some of you picked it up on the way in, otherwise look on the table on your way out. On Monday, from 3 to 5 p.m. is the 4th annual nature walk around and through Reston National Golf Course. It is co-sponsored by Reston Association and the Walker Nature Center and Rescue Reston. You should, if you can, find a way to go to it. I know some people in this room have been to it in the past, and it's wonderful. Also, if you have never had occasion to go to our Walker Nature Center, you must travel just a few miles from here and visit. We are a park. Also, I'm pleased to spread the word to folks that may not realize it. Earlier this year, Reston joined the Biophilic Cities organization. We're now a designated biophilic city along with Portland, Oregon, and Wellington, New Zealand, among other cities. It is our green space that causes that. Oh, before I go there, I'm sorry. Back up a little bit and look at this map. I know the board is very familiar with the area around the Dulles Toll Road. I just want to catch everybody up who's watching this on a term called the TSA corridor, Transit Station Area Corridor. It's the areas on each side of the Dulles Toll Road. It's mostly the Salmon area, but this is an old map. It's mostly that, but it definitely, planners that worked very hard on figuring out how we're going to accommodate this new Silver Line Metro that has come by now. They looked very carefully at where new development should go, and it should go in the TSA corridor. And I commend Wheelock for having just bought the Fannie Mae property. That is in the TSA corridor. Develop it. Great. We're expecting it there. We're expecting development there. There is a hard line on the TSA corridor at both golf courses. The golf courses are not for development. So back to the green spaces and our viewscapes. If we can get to the next slide. Now, do I do that? Well, no, I can do it. Just show me which button, and I can take it from there. Okay, thank you. All right. So here's one of our viewscapes. This is the golf cart path on North Shore Drive, looking south. This is what people see when they drive by, when they walk by. During it happened a couple of times in the focus group meeting, but I remember one time it really set some people's fur up on the back of their neck. When a lady was talking about enjoying how important these views are to folks, even though they don't play golf, the consultants told us that we were mistaken. The only ones who get to appreciate these views are the golfers, we were told. It was rather insulting. So these expansive views are on both sides of Reston are just so good for our health and enjoyment. With the focus group meetings, we were never asked to bring in what's good about Hidden Creek. That just wasn't part of the discussion. I wanted to take a minute to talk about one particular thing, and that's the fantastic meeting and event space that this community takes advantage of at Hidden Creek. It is an alternative to expensive hotel rooms. It's an alternative to the functional but, Reston Community Center rooms. The wedding events are very common here. I was just at a rehearsal dinner in the spring. It was beautiful, and I asked my neighbor, it was her son's wedding, I asked her, I said, so did you know a member at Hidden Creek? No, you're, and with proper ownership, I hope it won't change now, and I hope it won't change in the future. You can get meeting and event space, the Lions Club, the Rotary Club, the Chamber of Commerce meet there. The South Lakes High School football end-of-year banquet is held there. And it is something needed in this community and of great benefit. So next we will, you didn't really call it recreational village this time. In this particular presentation, but I just wanted to mention there had been talk in the focus groups. One of the ideas for the Grand Park was, cultural village, recreational village. These are all just ideas. But as I was looking at it, I was thinking, well, what happens to the 4 gyms, including Lifetime Fitness, which is quite a place. I'm not a member, but those who want to be can be. The 4 gyms and 2 yoga studios that are around. We already have this stuff, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I wish the current owners would listen. We already have it. Now, Lynn's going to take you through a survey that she conducted over the last few months.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the folks that are here in the room probably participated in the survey, so I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. So what I'd like to do is just highlight, we had several questions, but there was one question that I think was probably the most important that I'm going to focus on. But the community survey was administered during April the 22nd and September the 7th, and we sent the survey out to a lot of the folks that live in the community, the clusters. We actually had drop-downs, so we tried to capture which clusters we were getting responses from. And the overall results were, we had 454 responses. When I presented to this board previously, I think we had somewhere around 265. So we left the survey open a little longer, and I was really worried that some of the results were going to diminish in terms of the strongly agree and yes, we want you to so 420 of the 454 responses were Reston residents, which makes sense, and a large percentage of those were from Golf Course Island Cluster, who I believe is well represented here tonight, and where I live. So let's look at the most important question, and that is our question number 3, which was, I want to see Rescue Reston's North Course Committee fight to protect Hidden Creek's land use designation of private recreation use, more specifically to remain as a golf course. And this is 96.67% said yes. Thank you. And the 3.5%, I think that was somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 people that responded that way. Now, one of the things that we did, I know a lot of folks did provide additional comments about their feelings about the golf course, and in the interest of the board's time tonight, we discouraged folks coming up to talk about their feeling about the golf course. But what I've done is I've captured all of your comments, and we've printed them out and we've given them to the Reston Association board, both positive and negative. So everyone that had a comment is represented in these. So I just want to thank you all. And we will probably be following up with additional surveys as we go through the process. So thank you.
No. All right, well, I want to give you the grand takeaway on the Grand Park. Let's start with the most important piece, which was the least talked about tonight. Thank you for bringing it up, President Siegel. How many residential units? So we were given a number, 600 to 999, somewhere in there. Do you all know what 2/2 townhouses are? We have them on part of Lake Audubon, and it's just like the bottom. They're 4 stories high. First 2 stories is one townhouse, and next 2 stories up is another completely separate townhouse. So let's just say that they go, let's just use the number 800, but it takes years to get all this approved. So years down the line, maybe a zoning density increase happens in Reston. Well, now they can do double what they'd planned on the same amount of space. Let's think about how many cars that's going to bring in. You know, how many children for our schools and everything else that was talked about in that set of slides that represented the Board of Supervisors' priorities. It's, there's an awful lot here. I keep trying to, well, what they are doing is trying to focus on this grand park. My two grandchildren that were here tonight, when they started the, and I do appreciate them standing with us, they were very excited at the beginning of your slideshow. Oh my God, kids with kites and all that. You know, of course, they go down on the quartermaster soccer field and also fly kites. We have it already. Let's talk about the development. But if we must talk about the parks, then let's focus on a few other realities. Who will pay to create these park areas? There's a wonderful little park in Reston that most of you probably aren't aware of called the Sunrise Valley Wetlands. Just going to mention it real quickly. It is on the other side of Fairfax County Parkway. It was built, it came out of a wetland mitigation where the developers had to pay for it. So it was built with developer dollars, and it was, and I hope someday will be again, wonderful. It's a beautiful pond with a boardwalk across it. There's walkways. It's really a gem, a jewel. But it's owned by the insurance company that owns the building over there. And so then we come to the real crux of it, of who will maintain. Lynn and I will be and Sue, we're providing how to contact us with email. We won't have you bother Reston Association to have your questions go through. You can contact us directly. I'll be glad to tell you how to find the Sunrise Valley Wetlands. You can go take a walk and see how degraded it is. The benches, the boardwalk, the pond has filled in because it is not being maintained. Reston Association, at least the good environmental people, would love to take it over. It will cost money. It's a shame, and that's what happens. So, how many will drive to visit? If you build it, they will come. They already come to use our lakes and our pathways, don't they? We know they do. We can't have police out, guarding every access to the lake. So not only will all of Reston come to visit this grand place, but so will people outside of Reston. Now let's see. Parking. There's the neighborhood streets. There's the across Sunset Hills Road. I guess there's the parking at Plaza America. Oh my gosh, well then we better put up gates and start charging for parking to make sure, you've all heard that before. And the other choice is to put in parking lots, paving it, which is going to add to the stormwater problem that we already have. By the way, the stormwater pond, that is going to happen. It is going to happen on the property. And it is because of development, even on the south side of Reston. The south side is higher than the north side. The water's coming down. The developers, we are stuck with paying for problems from the developers with stormwater, and they want to do more development. Thank you very much. Parking. So let's talk about our walkable, bikeable community that we want so much. Another big conversation in Reston and with the county and with the transportation department is, where is the infrastructure that we need to go with all this development? This is how they do it in parts of Florida. I don't know where the Florida Department of Transportation figured out how to do this, but I wish we would figure it out in Virginia. I have seen this at many colleges. This road crossing that is, it's an elevator, so it handles the slow walkers, bicycles, wheelchairs, as well as someone who just doesn't feel like taking the stairs that day. This is in Tampa, Florida. Maybe you've seen it, Mr. Green. I think this is your neck of the woods. The road that this is crossing is very much like Reston Parkway. It's a 4-lane road with turn lanes. The speed limit is between 40 and 50 miles an hour. And if you we need it now, for sure, in many places, but especially on Sunset Hills and Wheelie and Reston Parkway, if you build this grand park that everyone's going to want to come to. And of course, Reston Town Center Association would love for the development to happen over at Hidden Creek, because then they would have that many more residents walking over to their merchants. So you can be sure that they're all for this idea. So wrapping up here, we're going to talk a bit about Reston's vision for Reston's golf course, rescue Reston's vision. And I think Reston's vision, it certainly was Bob Simon's vision. It's in the master plan, it's in the current comprehensive plan. And we will be sending the comments to Supervisor Hudgens. I believe that she will be very happy to know how much everyone cares. She does need to know that we care, and you all have done a great job of showing that tonight. Thank you. So here's our vision. Imagine the majority of the golf course land put into conservation easements that protect the land in perpetuity. What this means is no more Groundhog Day. Every year, year and a half, 2 years, we won't have to wake up and say, oh, it's time to pull out the yellow t-shirts again because another developer's come in with they figured out their strategy for developing one of our 2 golf courses. Imagine it being protected in perpetuity forever. It is possible, folks. Imagine green open vistas that are well maintained by their private owners. Well maintained. I have copies of the Around Reston magazine article that the North Course Committee wrote in this December. There are copies out on the table. This is a little magazine that comes into your mailbox once a quarter. And it's a great article that explains Reston's green recreational open space and the benefits that it gives all of us if we choose. Imagine that we keep all that we have, but it is even better. It is possible, folks. Stick with us, and let's see if we can make it happen.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Sue and Lynn.
One more slide.
One more slide, okay.
The case for an 18-hole golf tennis club. I happened to trip across this article in Golf Magazine last week. And if you take a minute to read that quote there by Wheelock partner Dan Green. Now, he's talking about a property that they bought out in the Texas Hill Country, a private golf club that had done well in the past, had not been doing well for quite a while, and as you read in the article headline, they made quite a comeback. And it's important to know that in the within an hour radius of Hidden Creek, we have multiple high-end private golf clubs with waiting lists. Now, Reston may not have Texas oil money, but we are the second richest county in the United States. Wheelock knows how to do this. They just don't want to. Therefore, sell it. Rescue Reston has been fighting this battle we're going on over 6 years now, and our motto does not change. Open space today, tomorrow, forever.
Thank you, Connie, Lynn, Sue. Before you step down from the podium, I'd just like to ask any of the board members have questions. So I see Julie's hand up, so thank you. Again, I'd just like to say thank you for taking time, and I'll save my comment for last. So Julie.
Okay. As an RA board director, I want to make it clear to all RA members and to Wheelock that I put my personal interests aside, and I must look at what's best for our RA members. And so I want to speak to the postcards that I and others on the board have been receiving. What's disappointing to me is, in trying to represent the members, it's important that you identify yourself. Getting postcards that have no address or way for me to know that it's coming from an RA member that I seek to represent their interests does not help. So I would like, if I make that personal request, in me trying to represent what all of our members want in this regard, to stand up and be counted as an affected party. I think there's been some good ideas presented. I'm always open to public space, open space, wanting to have more amenities available to us, but my job as a director is to represent the interest of our RA community. So.
May I say thank you to the postcards and any going to the supervisor also. Great. Just include your street address. And they really are important and read. Very effective.
I also thank you for all the postcards, and I would reiterate with what Julie's saying. It means more when I see a name and an address associated with it, because I've gotten a handful that are just a note with no information. Oh, I have a lot with names and addresses, but I'm just reiterating that some come without it. It's more impactful when there's a name associated. Street art.
I did too. I got a lot of cards. I have them all saved up. I'm going to put them on a poster at some point. I do have lots of addresses too.
Yeah.
So I will get back to you at some point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Connie, Lynn. Sue.
Any other questions?
John, Ben, anybody, Kathy, any questions? Hearing none, I just want to thank you three for coming and presenting. Again, tonight was an informational night. I want to thank our engaged and vocal community for being out here and becoming, and making your voices heard. That's how our community stays active and engaged. So thank you for engaging with us. So thank you all for coming out tonight. We'll take a second if people do want to leave. We've got more on the show. But thank you for coming out tonight, and we'll continue with it. We'll take a 5-minute recess, and then we will continue with the next agenda item. Thank you. Wish I had a gavel.
Maybe me, if I forget to write my name.
Good.
Mary Wells. So I. Me.
Hello and welcome back to the Reston Association Board meeting here in September. We are running very much behind, but I think we had some wonderful information sessions from both Wheelock and Rescue Reston, and appreciate everyone's patience as we continue. We are now moving to agenda item H, which is the land use update, and our acting CEO, Larry Butler. Larry.
Thank you, Eddie. So we had a lot of people leave the room, and actually what I'm going to talk about here, very briefly to try to help get us back on track, is related to that earlier subject. That'll be the third part of this. So this is going to be a really quick update. Oh, Sean, turn that off to save battery power. Okay, just real quick. PRC zoning ordinance amendment that we have been following since May of last year. The RA board and staff are still waiting for responses from Fairfax County with respect to the small group meetings we held over the course of the summer on transportation, parks, planning, and so forth. So we are, like the Coalition for a Plan Reston as well, awaiting answers before we can make any kind of judgment or anything else with that. So we are following that closely. As I said, this is going to be quick, so I'm ripping through this.
So no word from our August 20th letter.
No.
Okay, thank you.
ZMOD, that is the zoning ordinance modernization program that Fairfax County is going through. The zoning ordinance of Fairfax County is really, the guts of it are 40 years old, and so they have hired Clarion Associates, a firm that does this nationally, to modernize the Fairfax County zoning ordinance, make it, have graphic interfaces, and make it much more, we'll put this in quotes, user-friendly and so forth. And they're going to revise the land use categories, for permitted, special exception, and other things like that. And so we're at a point now where we're going to have to follow this probably more closely as they really get into the specific language. It's my understanding that there's not going to be a side-by-side or red line version comparing the old versus the new. So it's going to take some stealth reading, I think, to go through that and make sure that Reston's interests are protected. And the next public meeting on that particular subject is coming up here in just a couple weeks at McNair Elementary School, which is over in Herndon. So that's just a heads up, and we will try to have a presence at that meeting.
Larry, may I interrupt on that? Larry and I have had a chance to discuss this, and I think it would be good, and I would make a motion that Larry, on behalf of the board, write Fairfax County and ask for, if not a red line version, at least a table that allows us to walk between the new version and the old version. Only in that way will we know what has been radically changed or omitted. So
Are you making a motion?
I am.
Do we even need to do a motion, or can we just direct or set something, Larry? If we directed you to do that, is that just something you will follow
Yeah,
on and do?
I think it could fall in the category of without objection, we request staff to
Okay.
do so.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you. I think it's a great idea, John.
Great idea.
It was Tammy's idea.
Great idea, Tim.
Thank you, Tammy.
All right, then the third thing, which is related to the 130 people that were here just a little bit ago, I was asked to just brief the board quickly on what it takes to amend the comprehensive plan. And there's really two ways to do that in Fairfax County. There's a site-specific plan amendment process, which had an open period for North County, which includes Reston, that closed on December 2017. But because the master plan for the non-TSA parts of Reston was adopted in 2015, the Reston portion of Fairfax County North was not eligible. So essentially, there's that waiting period. So the other piece of that is that state law requires that the comprehensive plans have to be revisited every 5 years. And so the next cycle for that will likely be in 2020, 2021, in that general time frame when the comprehensive plan will be, more broadly opened back up. And so that's the site-specific plan amendment process. Then there's the broader, that used to be called out of turn, but comprehensive plan outside of the site-specific. And this is an applicant can request the district supervisor to essentially convince the full board to initiate a plan amendment. And this goes through a very thorough public vetting process. It has to be approved by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And it's often accompanied and concurrently with rezoning, development plan amendments, PRC plans, whatever the specifics of that particular property are that is going forward. And then in that, the applicant needs to provide justification. These are some of the examples of the justification that are typically applied, which is address emerging community concerns, environmental protection, economic development, and so forth. So there are really two ways that this can happen. And then to bring that more specific to Reston, specifically with Hidden Creek Country Club, and Steve and Dan are still here, the current designation or land use is Parks, Rec, and Open Space is really private open space, as we've all heard tonight from multiple sources. And of course, it's in the PRC zoning, and it is subject to Reston Association covenants. So to change the land of Hidden Creek to permit any other redevelopment would require an amendment to the comp plan or the Reston master plan, the development plan amendment, and PRC plan. And that's all decided by the Board of Supervisors, which I think was acknowledged earlier tonight too, that these decisions are Fairfax County's. And to get the comprehensive plan amendment, the applicants would have to wait for the next site-specific plan amendment rotation or go to the supervisor to request, again, what used to be called an out-of-turn plan amendment. They don't typically, I don't think they use that term much anymore. So those are really the two methods that they would have to pursue.
Larry, you didn't send us to that in your supplemental?
I did not, no. I finished this at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so I apologize.
You'll send it to us?
Sure. Yeah, we'll put this.
Put it in the Dropbox.
In the board's Dropbox. Absolutely. And that's it. I told you it's going to be quick.
Thank you. Do you have anybody have any questions for Larry on that?
Thank you, Larry.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
All right, next we move to agenda item I, the treasurer's report. Eric mentioned that he's delayed still, and so if Tom, are you? Tom, hello, Tom. It's the Tom Show, if that's okay. And welcome, Tom. Our new controller, Tom Deal, is here, and thank you for coming to brief us on this month's financial report.
Can I make a comment first? I don't know if everybody's met Tom here.
No.
No.
So Tom Deal's our new controller.
Our new controller.
Nice to meet everyone. That'd be us.
Sean will get after me, I didn't have my mic on. So Tom Deal, our new controller, and I want to thank him and Dave Honeywell, is he still here, our assistant controller. They have put in a lot of effort, and as some of you have heard me say, figuring out some of the very, very complex spreadsheets that our prior CFO and controller left. And they have done a masterful job of getting through that. Took less time than I thought it would, frankly, to get the financials and so forth. So I just want to give them a shout out for picking that up and doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you, Tom and Dave.
You're welcome. It's enjoyable. Dave and I.
Welcome to Reston Association, and Dave, thanks for welcoming our new controller with open arms and bringing him into the culture.
I'm just going to hit some key metrics for August 2018. It's the year-to-date financials. There's backup on the website, and we provided support for these numbers in the packet that was provided to the board members. So, and the year-to-date revenue was $17,174,282. That number was down actually 2% from the budget of $17,478,364. And that's comprised of assessment revenue, which is $14 million, and revenue non-assessment, which is almost $3 million. The operating expenses of $10,116,052 was actually down 4%, which is favorable to the budget of $10,577,144. Out of that $10,116,052, 53% is salary related, 14% is other employee costs, 5% is professional and technical support, 6% is facility rental, and 22% is others, which is related to goods and services. Within the month of August, we had a total head count, which is full-time equivalents of 212 employees, and that's compared to 240 as of 2017 for August. So that's down 12%. And that's accounted for various camps and programs that were ended short due to school starting sooner. There again, if anybody has questions, the support's behind there. I know the rest of the remaining meeting is on the budget. Yes.
I just have one question about the revenue. You said that for year-to-date we're down. Are we anticipating fixing that? Or is this related to the schools starting early and?
No, I
Saying the overall
I
2%.
can,
Yeah.
part of it is probably the proffer, SunTrust proffer. Last year, if you remember, Kate had taken on getting a proffer from SunTrust Bank, to whom we bank. We do like
We
15, 16 million of basically cash flows through the SunTrust Bank account.
You're
Various
saying
bank accounts that we have.
sponsorship, right?
So we were looking for sponsorships and support from them because they make a lot of money using our money. There was a lot of work done last year. I'm familiar with the history, so I'm speaking to that.
Yeah.
So there were lots of site visits and, follow-up meetings, but I think somewhere towards the end of the year, things didn't get close. And that, I think, is the reason why you have this delta.
Yeah, I just was wondering whether the trend was we would catch up and close that.
I remember,
and
as
I'm
we
sure
talked
that
about, there was that gap.
Yeah.
And there was a $200,000 revenue
Uh-huh.
gap.
160, that was 160, the sponsorship, that was the target.
Uh-huh.
That's what went into the budget last year. Other than that, you're probably gonna see some swim
Yeah.
and tennis passes, those kinds of things.
So
minor
anyway, it
things.
closed
Yeah,
in
was
that
a big
revenue
thing.
shortfall, and I think that's gonna remain.
Okay.
That's the one.
The point.
Go ahead, Tom, sorry.
That's okay. And that's
Sorry.
pretty much what I had to report then for August. Unfortunately, I was relying on Eric to,
Yeah, no, give the overview, but, so again, from a controller standpoint, again, with that, revenue down 2, operating expense down 4 as a positive thing, you're feeling comfortable with where you are right now and your year-end projections of where we'll be at
Yeah.
this stage?
I think in another segment, they'll produce where we projected the income to land. The
So
only-
do we have any other questions on this month's financials for Tom? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on to agenda item J, which is draft 2 of the 2019 operating and capital budgets. Thank you very much, Tom, which will bring us a lot of the similar information that we just took a look at and projecting it out to year end.
Okay, now the fun stuff. All right, so,
This is where we have to refer to the stuff that you sent us yesterday.
correct,
Okay.
correct. And I want to thank a lot of staff, a lot of the department heads, Tom and Dave consolidated this. So as we went from draft 1 to draft 2 in preparation for the fiscal committee meeting on Monday, and then, so almost every day we have made changes. And so that's why you got this yesterday, because we're literally, trying to make it as up-to-date as possible, both with the projections and some of the other changes that we made as we were paring down draft 1 to get to draft 2. And so this is just a cover sheet of what was in your packet. And so what I want to do is just walk through some of those things and then kind of really get into more conversation on 2 or 3 of those. So with that, why didn't that go? There we go. Wow, it's hard to read from here. This is just FYI. These are just some of the things that are happening in this area and nationally with respect to, overall economic indicators having to do with unemployment in Fairfax County and Northern Virginia, which is lower than anywhere in the metro DC area. I think some of you are quite aware of our employment situation right now and the difficulty in finding candidates at many levels. I think I can say that safely here. So that's one. Consumer price index is traveling upwards. The Fed just raised their rates yesterday by a quarter point. So there's a lot of things that are working, that as we get into 2019, that the costs of goods and services, some costs of employment, they're not staying flat right now. That's my whole point with this information. So, Julie, getting to your point, you also have here the year-end forecast, something that the fiscal committee had requested at the August 20th combined meeting. So this was our first crack at the year-end projections, went to all the budget managers, department heads, and so forth. And as you can see, on the revenue side, I can't see the number from here, but we are projecting that we're going to be down on revenue, and that's primarily non-assessment revenues. So that's a trend that is going to continue, through the end of the year. We'd like to hope there'd be some turnaround in that, but we're not super optimistic. And then on the expense side, we're trending below. And as I explained to the fiscal committee on Monday night, the way we look at this is if our program managers, and I'm really, I think about the program managers, tennis, pools, camps, and so forth, if they're not meeting their revenue targets, they're very prudent with the dollars, and they're gonna spend less. And so if I'm going to use really round numbers. So if we're making $400,000 less revenue on, let's just say on the programmatic side, they're going to look at how can we save $400,000 on the expense side. And the important thing to understand here is that roughly $400,000 is about 2.3% of an $18 million budget. So it's a pretty small number. And so for those of you who do home budgeting, if you end the year at 2.3% under what you thought you might spend, you'd probably say, hey, I did pretty well. And that's the way I like to think of it. So that's the forecast.
That is still, if you look at it as 400,000, that's still $20 per household from an assessment perspective. So it does add up, it is meaningful. But also from a programming cost perspective, right, a lot of the cost for programming is really variable, right? It's basically the employees that are going to support it, your facilities usage. There's a fixed cost element, but a substantial portion is really variable. So we should be coming down. If we are not having the programming revenues, that means people are not using those programs. So I would expect that we should be lower on those things without question, right? So, but it's good. It's all right.
Sounds like you said.
Right, but a good example of that is with camps. So we have a camp ratio that we're very proud of. And so while we may not hire, we may have fewer campers register, but we're going to maintain that same ratio in our camps. And so you're exactly right, Sridhar, that it will be less, but there are certain pieces where it's not going to be as this is not going to sound right, as less as you might think it would be. But generally, that is the case.
It's not what I want. Yeah, that makes sense.
So these are the items that were included in the 2019 draft 2. Now, most of these items you saw in June, and you also saw them when I presented in July, or not July, but in August I reminded, these are the things that we've put in here. And I'm going to do one thing.
I hope everybody brought their laptops or their iPads, because I can't read that either. So, everyone's got that thing. Or printouts or whatever. Oh, magnifying glasses, good.
So again, I just want to run through these. A couple of these I think warrant a little bit of discussion. So these are the things that we've included. You heard me say before the reserve study, which we're actually going to, working with Chris, and I think the fiscal committee as well. We're going to look at getting that RFP started at the end of this year so that we can engage them at the first of the year so that we can hopefully have the results of the reserve study in time for the biennial budget development process starting next year.
Question on the reserve study number of 60,000. Are we budgeting more than we've spent in the past so that we can get a more comprehensive, more thorough reserve study? I know we talked a little bit about this last night in the listening session about a need to get a more comprehensive reserve study. So does that 60,000, and I'm looking at Chris, does it represent a more,
Yes.
yes, good, thank you.
It's
That's what I wanted to
stereophonic.
hear.
So, Larry, have we now identified everything we own so that they will be able to actually do the study correctly?
Yes, we've identified, it was about 758 individual assets, something like that. It's a humongous list.
Okay.
Good.
And one of the things, sure. One of the things that we're also going to do with this reserve study, and I think, Andy may have even mentioned this at the fiscal committee meeting, is that typically the reserve studies forecast kind of the fixed cost of replacing the fence or the filter. But for a lot of projects, particularly some of our larger projects, it does not include the soft costs. And so we want to
Okay.
factor that in an appropriate way so that the real cost of doing some of these repair and replacement projects is known and known well ahead of time.
Right, so just
that
like
was
we
the
put
problem
in that,
last time.
yeah, we put in that step in our project planning that included engineering and study soft costs that we didn't have before.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Next one is the POA software. You've heard me talk about that. We've been relying on now not supported with a person that's left our employment. So we're looking at going to a, outsourced POA software, which we think makes great sense. You've heard me talk about dechlorination systems. We were able to do this. We're doing half the pools in 1 year, half the following. Member Suite, which is our billings and collections system, which was actually budgeted this year, so we're going to carry forward the $75,000 that was in capital for that, but then what was not included in this year's budget was the $30K for the annual licensing, so we've got that budget in for next year. Healthcare cost increase. In draft one, we put a placeholder of 5%. I think I narrated that. We knew it was going to go up. We didn't know how much, so we put 5%. Melissa got the renewal from Kaiser, and it's 6.5. So we've now factored in that additional 1.5% into the draft two. So that's in there.
I know, Larry, last year's board started a review with HR about the competitiveness and the benchmarking of overall benefits and overall remuneration. I know that conversation's continuing, and such that that will continue throughout the month as we continue to work this and talk that through, so that next month we can have a further conversation about that. So thank you for bringing that up and making sure we're aware of it.
Target marketing, this is to do specific target marketing for non-assessment revenues, particularly on the Parks and Rec and programming side, as well as Lake House. So we've included that.
Can I ask, so under non-assessment, this target marketing, I'm a big proponent of, we market a lot, but we don't close the deal. And I was just wondering if there is somewhere a comprehensive list of every item that we market, whether it's the bench along the lake, a pavilion. I mean, is there an overall list of those items that we sell?
We have.
I mean, how do you come up with the number of non-assessment revenue of those kinds of things?
We have, it's approximately 10 pages. We have a fee schedule for everything that we sell,
Okay.
whether it's permanent boat mooring fee, garden plot, tennis, everything.
Does that also assign a department to make the sale? Yes?
Well, essentially, the program managers work with communications to market their programmatic aspects. I mean,
It's a combination of departments, so there's the member services, communications, there's the pool and tennis service, marketing. Mike Leone does some of that through the communication channels that he has, but it really, then we need to look at the marketing, where the money is being spent, where the budget is.
And I think I've heard
Because I would
through.
also tell you that maybe you need to take money out of marketing and put it into sales.
Right. So I think Larry, I've heard a lot of communication and conversation about marketing and sales and, and making sure that we understand that obviously both are needed, right? If you're gonna market the lake house as a wedding venue, who's out there selling it, and who's gonna close the deal on those things? So I've heard a lot of comments on that, so I think this board would like to hear more between you and Mike about how does it get marketed and who's on the hook for sales? Is there a quota? Who's on the hook for sales? And how does it get monitored and watched? And I've heard a lot of conversation, so I think we're gonna need to hear more about that over the next month.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
John, you had a question.
It was along the same line. I'm wondering whether the budget shows any anticipated increased revenues because of this increase in marketing, or put in another way, what's the ROI?
What am I gonna see for my 20,000?
New revenues built in?
Right, and I think, go ahead, Mike. Yep, you need to come up to a microphone.
You might need to come up here, Mike.
Mic to the mic.
Mike to the mic.
Just real quickly, there are increased revenues projected for conference center. Most of our rental facilities, we've increased our percentages for next year on our rental facilities. So that includes the lake houses. We look at weddings and special events. The conference center, there's an increase in revenue in those lines as well. I'm not 100% sure about pool and tennis passes, but there probably is an increase in that budget as well.
Did we make the revenue number, or are we making the revenue number?
In this category?
Well, for our,
For the non-assessment revenue.
so, okay, so if you're not making the revenue, how do you increase what you think you're gonna get? That doesn't make sense to me.
The important thing to know is prior to 2 years ago, we budgeted 0 for non-assessment revenue, for marketing, for any type of promotion. All of our marketing efforts were all done with flyers, handouts, anything we could do for free with our members. What we're finding more and more of is, along with marketing to our members, which we can do through some of our own internal communications channels, we need to market to non-members as well. So when you look at camps, for example, or you look at pool and tennis passes to non-members at a substantially higher cost, we have no way to target those potential customers unless we look at other marketing opportunities. So for example, we're doing some test marketing with CBS, it's actually Entercom Media. They're doing some social media for us in the surrounding communities to help drive rentals at the lake house, both on the corporate side and for special events. So to get to some of those external target markets, there's a cost to do that because we don't have the internal resources to do that.
And I
So
think
these
that-
marketing dollars would
I
help
could
us do some of that other target marketing.
Mike, I think in the concept that makes sense. I think the next step before we finalize on this, we probably shouldn't take too much more time. I think this board will need to see more granularized targets. This is how much, we spent this year and these categories, and this is where we got. We feel if we spend this much more in targeted marketing, we're gonna have these benchmarks or these goals to hit in the next year that we can monitor and see how we're doing. I think this board is gonna need to see something like that to feel confident with that. And I think we need a longer conversation on that, but in the interest of time, is it okay? Sridhar, you had one more comment?
I was gonna ask for next week, as I was gonna dive deeper into the budget, I was going to ask for all the rentals. Lake House, how did we do this year? I saw the initial marketing plan, you and I sat down, at the beginning of the year, I want to see where we are, and what's the projection is for that, and swim and, tennis, it's basically walk-in and the swim, the tennis leagues, right? So now, how are we going to increase that? So I'd like to see where the different sources of growth are in each of those locations, and that's a next week exercise I was gonna get into anyway. So this is a heads up for you.
Yeah, and so please don't think that we're saying no. I think we all think it makes sense in concept. We just want to see a little bit more of a detailed plan.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Past,
Thank you.
future, present.
Kathy, you're good?
Okay.
Okay, Larry, keep us going.
I'm trying. I just took Sean's hijacking.
Oh, Sean.
Is this the one?
Yes.
Can't see it.
Okay.
I can't see that.
Now what, we have to zoom in on this, so if you have your iPad or laptop, if you can zoom in on that. This is probably the sheet you'll want to study the most or have studied the most in advance of coming tonight. It's probably the one you're going to study the most after tonight. So after the fiscal committee discussion, they were like, hey, we'd like to see 2017 actual, we'd like to see the 2018 budget, we'd like to see your first 2018 forecast, and then the various drafts. And so we've plotted them, thanks to Tom and Dave, all on one page. So it's a lot of information. And I'm not going to go through every piece here, unless you want me to.
Highlights, please.
Pardon?
Highlights, please.
So the important thing.
Yeah, the money items here, yeah.
Yeah, the important thing is that if you look at draft 2, A, B, and C, and you go down to the bottom on the revenue, okay, on the operating revenues, you'll see that essentially the programmatic revenue and so forth stays the same. The variation in these is the assessment rate. Okay, so this ties back into that single-page chart, which is also in this package. But importantly, and what I'll get to in just a minute, is when you go from draft 1 to draft 2, you will notice a reduction particularly on the expense side. So, as I said, I directed the staff to go in and cut 2.5%, and I gave it to the department heads and budget managers' discretion to do that. In doing so and going through that exercise, we actually got to about 2.9, I think. So we've actually, cut out a lot. And also in your package is where we took those dollars from. And if you recall my email,
Right.
I wanted to explain the health insurance part, because I know that people are like, wait, what's going on here? So the first draft that was put together, the very first draft, included 100% of the healthcare premium as an RA expense. There was no offset for the currently 10% employee part or the dependent part. So we've worked with Melissa, extensive charting and so forth of where everybody was, currently, and so we pulled that out. So part of that 2.9% includes, what was the total number there? About $84,000 reduction in expenses, because that was not in draft 1. Now Tom and I discovered that.
It's really not 2.9 then, it's actually lower than that, right? Because if you didn't factor that in initially as you should have, right, the real reduction is not. The challenge is not 2.9%, it's less than that.
It was about 2.3. After I went through everything with the staff, it was about 2.3, and at the same time, we found that part out. So
Another way of saying that is the combination of the reductions plus the correction of the error on the health insurance has gone to about 2.9% down from draft 1.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, again, you can see the draft over on the far right, the draft 1 to draft 2B variance. Draft 2B, I use that as a baseline because that's the one that you've seen before, the one I first presented. So, I don't know how much detail you want me to go in on this.
Could you help me, so the variant cells for both revenues and expenses at the extreme right green heading, please help me understand what F over, is that over?
Favorable
or unfavorable.
Favorable or unfavorable, okay.
So Larry, in these reductions, you're reducing education, training, professional development. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'm not sure that that's the wisest.
Yeah.
And a customer
I had
service.
a similar question on the next.
Yeah, so I would think,
Item.
Larry, that rather than this slide, I think we probably more have questions on your next slide, which is where you've reduced.
Yeah.
And maybe you could give us a couple of the highlights of what you think are the most impactful reductions as you talk to the SLT, and it sounds like there's some questions as
I
well.
mean, you know, to me, if we're gonna try and change some of the culture to make it more customer service, more member satisfaction, that training comes to the top of the list of what we need to do for employees. So,
I personally don't disagree with you there. What and really what the staff focused on is what are those things that are going to impact really the kind of the member-facing stuff the least. And there are some people who say, well, you know, sending staff to go out and get, you know, additional training so they can go take a better job elsewhere or something. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to approach that line of thinking. So the task was really, you know, use your discretion, but try not to focus on the things that frankly people see. And I don't disagree with you that, you know, whether it's customer service training or, you know, community association institute training, I mean, that's a discussion that I think this board should have.
Sean, can you move it down to the next page, which is draft 1 to draft 2 reductions? Because I think that's what we're focusing on now.
Yeah, thank you for.
So this is, if I can comment, in response to what you said also, Kathy. So when I go into detail, I'm gonna look at some of these kinds of things. Some of these things could be realigned, could be resized, and I think that's what you're doing. So there's lots of things inside this that can probably be reduced, I think, over time. So it's a good thing to do.
Before we start this, is my understanding correct that these reductions are embodied in 2A, 2B, and 2C, all of them?
Correct, yeah, so the variable on A, B, and C was the assessment level.
All right.
So all of these reductions are in all three scenarios?
Correct. Because my direction was take 2.5% on the expense side.
I'll change that to, your offer was to try and work with staff to do so, rather than a direction. But yes, it made sense. One of the financial tools we talk about to make this budget work is to reduce expenses, and this is your first shot at that.
This is my
So
first
thank you.
crack at it. The staff might say, well, it sounded like direction, but that's fine. So,
Are there any that you'd want to call out on this page? It's a long list, there's a lot of things. Is there anything you'd like to call out beyond what Kathy's described in terms of professional development? Are there other ones that you'd want us to focus on?
Well, I mean, my general question is it your professional judgment, Larry, that all of the reductions you've put here do not injure fulfillment of our mission? So there's reduction of repairs, reduction of crack filling, I noted a bunch of them. But is it your professional judgment and that of your senior staff who work with you on this, that none of these compromise in a bad way our facilities or our services?
I would say they're very, very, very small compromises. So on repair and maintenance. So if we cut out $2,000 from, let's say, a $15,000 line item, you know, when you get to the end of the year, if there's, you know, some boards that need to be replaced or things like that, maybe we don't have the budget to do that, and we'll have to pick those up the next year. So there's an element, and this is always the case, there's an element of deferred maintenance, whether that's mulching, weeding, trash cans, flower beds, you know, all those kinds of things. And that's just the reality of it. And, you know, as we talked about a little bit after the listening session last night, Reston is a place that has way more facilities than virtually any municipality with 60,000 people,
or 70, probably 80,000 people. When you think of the pools, the pathways, the tennis courts, we are facility rich, and there is a cost to that. And so to the extent that, we, pick away at those little things, yeah, I mean, we're not cutting out entire line items and say, we're not gonna do any crack repairs on our tennis courts. But or we maybe reduce it a little bit. It's those kinds of things. But, I felt it was important, and we put the assessment impact of each of those over to the right. Most of them are in cents, but I felt it was important so that you got an understanding that cumulatively, this is, these things get you down to the $20 approximately. But, so what I really don't want to do is say, well, this one in like, 4,700 is 2 cents. That's not the level of discussion that we should be having. It's more, what's the right thing to do on the broader basis?
And I'm asking the question in a general way.
Yeah. So, yeah, this does not compromise our mission. Basically, I think what it does, it defers a very small amount of those things, whether it's the training, whether it's the maintenance, the painting, mulching, fertilizer. You see the categories. What was that?
I said buy one less bag, something. It's actually quite, I should say not something that would break the back, so to speak, of the people that are doing the work. It's very little. It's not much, but it's good. Good effort. Thanks.
So, thank you for giving us the detail, Larry. Do you want to go over again, certainly these next couple sheets to talk about, kind of the different views on the operating fund?
I do. So, but again, after the meeting, and, we'll be coming back to the fiscal committee meeting with, and they got all this information as well. So I'm sure at our next fiscal committee meeting, we'll have a very robust conversation. So, but if you have questions between now and then, of me and the other staff, get them to me, and I'll try to get those answered as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
So the next sheet is the assessment impact summary, which you have seen before, but we've got obviously the new numbers in there, so a couple things have changed. And again, what we did here as well, we added the forecast. That was a request of the fiscal committee. So we've got the 2017 actual.
Which page are we looking at?
Right there, right where you're here. So we've got the 2017 actual, the 2018 budget, and then our first 2018 forecast. And also understand too that when we get the September financials, we'll update those forecasts. So that is a, doesn't sound right, but it's a moving target, because it's just, towards the end of the year, we do that every month with the financials. And then you have the draft one, the original one you saw, which is right in the middle there. And then you have the 2A, 2B, and 2C, where again, the variable on that is assessment revenue. And I think it's important, so you all get a perspective of, what are the impacts of, $400,000 down or up and so forth. And in draft 2, which is the very first one I presented, which is a 2.5% increase in the base assessment to $699, with the current numbers in draft 2, that would require pulling $70,000 from the operating reserve, which we're going to go over next. And then keeping the assessment at $682 would require, again, given the numbers that you have in front of you, again, that's the fundamental thing to remember, would require $430,000 from the operating reserve or cash balance as we get to the end of the year. I think Julie had a question.
Lake Audubon dredging is out of RRF?
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure it's in there.
And then you'll see the footnote on the bottom of this chart as well. So again, it's just a reminder that all the draft 2 versions have the 6.5% on the premium with the current employee share factored in. And then the 2.
Meaning the reduction is not in. The plan that we had last year was to reduce 555.
Correct, that is
That's
not
not
it.
fact, that's
And
not
so,
it.
so I'm glad you brought that up, because in the email that I sent out, I used $34,000. It's, Melissa redid those calculations, it's $38,000, which is about roughly $1.80 of assessment impact. So just, so you have that knowledge as you discuss this. And then the next sheet is, actually, Tom, you want to come up? He's the mastermind behind this, so I should let him take some of this. Yeah, glasses, yeah. Small print.
Okay, the first column was the budget, and the second column was the projection. So going through there, we started out with cash of the 5 million, that's as of August the 31st. And the next line item is basically the remaining revenue that we're gonna collect. The budgeted, again, is in the one column, and our projection is the second column. So the next line item is the amount remaining that we're to spend, the expenses remaining. There again, the budget and the projection. So if you add the cash that you're going to receive and you subtract the expenses you're going to expend, that leaves us remaining cash of that $1 million. And then the effect of what's on the balance sheet as of August 31st, you have accounts receivable that you'll end up collecting before the year end. Accounts payable that you'll spend, those are expenses. Same with accrued salaries and accrued taxes. So that 215.
Tom?
Yes, sir.
A question on the salaries. So this is, what are these, the 644? Why are we already have a line item up there for salaries as part of the operating expenses. That's the 4.4, right? What is this accrued salaries that's this large?
But as of August 31st, there's accrued salaries and benefits and employee tax,
What is that
related.
number? I'm trying to see where that cash payout comes out for that, because most of it should be captured up there in the
Expenses line.
remaining expenses to be paid, right? Do you know the detail behind the 644? If not, we can talk about it next week when we are going to meet, but I'd like to understand why that's as high as that.
Because
AP I can understand, AP is 150, I can completely understand, payroll taxes.
you have to take it,
Straightforward.
you have to take it back to a cash basis. Those numbers up there are on an accrual basis.
Right.
So on the balance sheet, yeah, that accrual, you understand the debit
Yes.
credit
Yep.
side of it. That takes in the, account for the accrual of it, but the cash hasn't been spent yet.
Okay.
So that's what that part of it is.
Okay, I mean, I'm trying to see how the cash goes out. Anyway, we'll talk next week.
Yeah, okay. So then that leaves you with the remaining 1.2 and 1.3 as far as cash. That would be the low point in December. The next line item. The next line item was actually the deferred income. This is the assessment money that we collect in December from sending out the assessments, that we can't recognize the revenue, but we do receive the cash. So therefore, I utilized the lowest, because that was what we had discussed in the fiscal committee, just to be conservative. And the lowest was that 1.1, almost 1.2 million. Originally, I had 4 years there and was using a weighted average, but we went with the conservative number of the 1.19. So adding that back gives us a cash balance projection as of December 31st of the 2.4 and the 2.5 million. So the question we had in there is, what is a good reserve to have at the end of the year to cover expenses? And therefore, I've got 4 months, 3 months, 2.5 months, and 2 months. And it could be 1 month, but that's for you guys to give us a direction on. And that will kind of.
Is there an industry standard? On how many months?
Well, I guess it's based on your spending, and that's kind of where we did the reserve of 2 months. But I wanted to show, Larry
Yeah.
talked about it, the various months, yeah.
All right, if I can comment. Reston Association is pretty much risk-free from that perspective, right? Because while you have 2.5 million, by March 31st, we would have received about 90% of the
Right.
money.
Right.
And that's going to come in January, February. So, I mean, in a normal situation, I would, depending upon the nature of your business, it really depends on the nature of your business. Here, it's pretty risk-free, so.
I think I
So
attended
results-wise, I personally am not that worried, but.
and I know, Ben, you attended the fiscal team meeting, and I attended that on Monday, and there were a number of different opinions on, what that is, ranging from 3 months to 2 months to 1 month. Different people, felt that they were comfortable with that, and so I think that's still up for some more debate, and I think the fiscal committee said they would do some more discussion of that.
Yeah, but the general consensus was what we just talked about, it being risk-free in the sense that, yes, based on timing, we may be a month or so behind, but as you can see from the previous years, we have never run out of money because we don't have that concept in the way we collect our revenues. Also, let me say, because you were talking about what's the industry standard or what's typical, well, I guess in our daily lives, we choose to have different benchmarks as what we feel comfortable as our safety money. But here I would say that this really is operating reserves in a checking account that is at some point through the year has $5 million extra dollars in it, which has no place as per our deeds and resolutions, as per our founding bylaws. And it's just some money that has accumulated over years by collecting more money than we've spent from our members. So I just wanted to lay that out there. And what you're seeing over here is the discussion about what is a safe amount to dip into those funds in order to tie back to the previous sheet that you see of taking out either 70,000 to 440 or somewhere in between. That's all the discussions that we need to have. But this is the analysis in order to plug into that sheet to figure out what our assessment will be.
So in the block, I'm not quite sure I understand the cash reserve block. I see X equals 4 months, 3 months, 2.5. What's the next set of numbers? 344.86?
That's just an equation. Like if you took 12 months divided by 4 equals 3. Same thing, 12 months divided by 3 is 4.
Okay.
So it's,
It was just an equation I put in there. So that,
it's basically taking the actuals for 2019, what could be a projected actual, and dividing that by how many months of
Okay.
reserves you need to
I
have.
got it.
So that's, to respond to what Ben just said. So my bias is first to look at the costs and the expense structure, how correctly sized we are across the board before we actually go into the operating reserves. Reserves are there. As I said, I'm comfortable with the risk profile of Reston Association, so I'm not worried about us running out of cash. I said this last year when I talked about loan payoff, and I'll say it again. Cash profile, I think as an organization, we are reasonably well placed.
So
I'm not
fiscal
worried about-
committee is going to come back to us with the recommendation, is that it?
Could you
Can I
repeat the
finish?
figure?
Yeah,
Is it by February? we
Wait,
receive-
John,
Streeter's not
I think Streeter's not finished, and then we'll
Oh,
go right to you.
I'm sorry,
okay?
Streeter.
I did it.
Okay.
Okay,
She
so
always does it for me.
let's, in fact, we'll try and,
Anyway, so
we'll orchestrate.
my bias is first going to be to look at the costs, the expenses across the board, and then we can talk about using reserves to get the assessments down or something, but that's a different, that first thing should be to look at the costs.
Sure, and then that's what we've been
That's what
discussing
we're
for the
gonna
last month, and Larry's done a first good track at it, and we'll continue talking about it, so.
To do that.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, I missed it. So we receive most of our assessment income what percentage by, was it February? or-
Well, by March
March?
1st, we receive about 80%,
If not better.
Like,
not better,
yeah,
maybe
but
85.
more, yeah.
But yeah,
Closer
the
to
vast
90.
majority of it's in the first 3 months of the year.
And do we have any further questions? I know I have one. Okay, so I know the fiscal committee talked a lot about year-end forecast versus budget, just because then those expense reductions that you think through, are either done from a zero-based budgeting standpoint, or based on this year's budget, or based on what I'm actually spending this year as a forecast. And so would certainly like to hear a little bit more based upon, not tonight, but as you think this through, there was a 2018 budget, and we missed it or we made it in different pieces. But we've also now got our forecast of what we're actually going to spend, and then how do these, how are we doing with these expense reductions off that forecast? I think was the fiscal committee's main thrust, so if we could talk more about that
Right,
maybe next
and I just
time.
want to give just a quick snippet on that, because we actually had a question sent by one of the fiscal committee members. So, one of the things that is important to keep in mind, we have been short-staffed this year, and so the forecast includes, and let's talk about the CFO and the salary, a CFO makes. So we're going to have, possibly 4 or 5 months of no CFO salary or benefits being paid out. And so that goes into the forecast, right? Because we're not paying that out. And so I just want to, and we'll narrate this further, but just understand that when you say, hey, well, you didn't spend all your money in 2018, recognize that there's going to be a pretty good piece of that was salaries that are budgeted for fully in 2019 in the draft.
And I think
Just
your
a-
point's well taken of looking at it at a gross level, but then when you look at it more granular levels of, here was the budget on that line item, here's the forecast, and now here's what we're doing in terms of expense reduction, very much understanding that certain ones, obviously, we didn't pay a CFO salary for 4 months, so it's gonna be low, we have to, that won't sustain next year, it'll be higher,
Right.
so
Yeah, so
completely
we'll-
understand.
So we've already started to track some of those things. I know Tom, what was that, today or yesterday? They're kind of running together, but yeah, so very recently, we've already started to look at some of those things, because we know that those questions are going to come up, either, with the fiscal committee or board or both.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Do you have any other questions for Larry tonight?
I have one more sheet.
He has one more sheet.
And this is, this question comes up a lot. It comes up at the fiscal committee, this has to do with legal fees. And so I wanted
Okay.
to make sure everybody understood where they come from, what they're for, and that they're going down on a general trending basis. But I want to explain a couple things, because I think it's important. So what we've plotted here, pretty straightforward, 14, 15, 16, 17 actuals. And we used to budget legal in a 1,600 category. We're not using that now, so you'll see that just end abruptly, and they were spread into those departments where they're actually spent.
Yep.
So you've got corporate and board, I think you all understand pretty well where those monies go. Finance, that is on the collection side, almost 100%. And it's important to note that, and we're trying to get a much better handle on this, and that's going to be a broader discussion with the board on collections issue. But right now, we figured there's about 70%. We think it's probably a little higher, but we're using 70% of that we get back through the collections process. Okay? So even though you see that expense, understand that 70% of that comes back as revenue through the collections process.
So it's offset.
It's offset.
It's-
So
it's-
it's
it's-
about 70%.
Costs us about 30.
So another way of looking at it, it's very
30%.
poor recovery.
Part of recovery.
But that's not your problem. I've talked about this before. It is very poor recovery. We'll address that. The collection
that's-
model is not. I know
That
it's
is
not-
why I led with,
Yeah.
there should be more conversation about it, and
Right.
I think our general counsel would agree with that. So, again, 1,500 finance, that's collections, management services. This includes our general counsel's salary, as well as outside legal services in case we get sued under the D&O policy, okay? So as a corporate entity.
Larry, did you want to mention that we dropped $25,000?
Yes, so we put in, we had 2 cases, if you will, of being sued in draft one. After going to the fiscal committee meeting, and they said, and I even talked about it myself, about, speculative budgeting, which I'm not a fan of, because we've experienced that, the repercussions of that this year. So I said, you know what, Tony? And based upon the discussion about, the cash that we have and so forth, so we're budgeting that it's gonna happen once. And if it happens twice, we'll kick a tree stump or something, but we can find the deductible to pay for that. So that's factored into draft two. Thank you for bringing that up, Tony. And then covenants, you can see that. 2018, that budget was 10. I think Anna will tell you that, certainly based upon the year-to-date actual, that is not adequate. So we have made that good because, we're seeing more covenants cases. That's not by our choice, that's just one of those things that happens. And then land use, budgeted 2018 at 100, and we are reducing that down considerably. That's something that, for the past 3 or 4 months, particularly when we have a planner on staff, we don't have to rely on that so much. This is something that we may talk a little bit about later this evening, on a kind of a personnel level basis. Julie?
On the covenants, I'm just a little confused. This isn't where we deal with court-ordered repairs, and why do we have, if in 2017, it cost us $70,000, why do we think we're gonna get away with 10 or 50?
Well, no, 10 is what was budgeted in 18, and we've got it at 60 in 19. Because we think that's a more realistic number.
How did we go down from 70 to 10?
That was Kate's challenge to Anna. Yes, I know that. So,
All
see,
right.
I'm covering
Okay.
for you.
Got it. Enough said. Keep going.
It was Kate's challenge to Anna last year,
Okay.
based on new processes, new things, all of which didn't. Yeah, there was that too.
So I wanted to share this because we get questions about it a lot, and I wanted to show that there's a trend, a very positive trend. And then when you factor in roughly 70% right now on the recovery on the collection side, it's a much better picture than it has been in the fairly recent past. And so I think we're definitely going the right direction, and I'll let Tony answer any questions.
Well, no, thank you for sharing that. It's been a big issue for a number of years, and it's, the detail has been lacking, so that there is more detail now, and we have numbers to share and discuss is a huge step forward. So thank you, Larry and Tony, for that. And Ben, you had a question.
Not on the legal side, but just before Larry leaves, I wanted to summarize and try to see if we have a common understanding of where this goes from here, because that's what we did in the last meeting. We saw draft 1, and we discussed about how would we go towards draft 2. So if I can take a stab at it, and then you all can chime in about any items I may miss in here. So on Monday, we didn't have the detailed itemized expenses.
Correct.
So the fiscal committee wanted to take a look at that, to see whether that 15 million and something, whether that made sense. So I think that's what the fiscal committee will take a look at. And I've heard a couple of requests here to want to take a look at cost items again, to see if they can be further reduced. So you can expect that to be something for you to look at, if that can be done further. I know you try to bring it down 2.6%, but I would like to see if we can reduce that further. And then we, from the fiscal committee, again have a further recommendation after understanding the itemized expenses, trying to reduce the expenses, and then come to look at what is it that we can dip into the surplus to use that as a component to reduce our assessments. And finally, I know not everybody's comfortable with, but just something as a discussion item, to look at how to try to maintain the reserve funds. I'm talking about RRF fund, we have the number 3,000,001 right now, to still keep that number, or to try to, I know someone from the fiscal committee had a suggestion on how to be able to do that, is to still follow the algorithm and set that 3 million aside, but to only spend less, and that way have a component towards further bringing down the assessments. So just as a discussion item, to keep that item open. And if you all agree that,
I don't understand the last piece, but we can talk about it.
well, I agree with that. I don't understand it completely either, but that is something, that's why I think the way it was presented in the fiscal committee, not everybody understood, so that idea did not get a lot of traction. But there might be something there, so just something for us to look into further.
John?
I don't know which part of triple RF they are talking about.
I think at the fiscal committee, it seemed like there was some, just as the operating fund, people were saying, is that a possibility of debate on how big it could be or how much one could take from it? They wanted to do a study on the repair and replacement fund to see if, spending less every year, if, Chris is doing a great job spending less than his budget, is that thing growing bigger than it was? I don't think we should talk about it tonight, but I think that idea of, is it right-sized, is a reasonable discussion.
So, quick comment to that. Can I, John, just as
Go
my
ahead.
way of
Go
breakdown,
ahead.
right? There are three parts to the triple RF fund, very high level, okay?
Mhm.
There's the 3.1 in Calcula portfolio, which is segregated.
The minimum
Pretty
balance.
much, it's like the minimum balance
Right.
that you know about. The remaining, less than $1 million, maybe about 800, last year was about 893, I don't know where it is now. How much of it is really the only piece of, within that 7+ million, which is really the unencumbered funds that comes from Chris saving money from this project, or based on the actuals, this is what we budgeted. The remaining 2.5, 3 million is really, is cash sitting there to pay for this year's capital projects, as well as the carry forwards from 2016,
Right.
17. So that cash is not free money. That
Agreed.
cash is set aside to pay for payables this year for the capital project spending.
Right.
That's what it's there for. So it's not, you can't use that for assessment reduction.
I think we all agree that, but there is, as he showed in some of his, as Tom showed in some of his slides of the RRF fund, there is a non-assigned area in that.
It's about 800,000.
Right, and that's about 800,000, that's what it was last year. And the question in the fiscal committee was, is that right-sized? And that discussion or that exercise about that is perfectly fine, is all I'm saying. I completely, as one of the architects of the financial resolution 3 of how we did that, I'm very reticent to touch that, but to have a discussion about, is it right-sized or is it growing because of carry forwards or the unencumbered part, I'm certainly fine to have a discussion.
It's a good discussion to have. Last year, I just want to close out with the final point on that, if you don't mind, Kathy. Last year, I had recommended that we use this unencumbered funds as a set-off for this year's triple RF allocation. Like, for example, this year, if you're going to allocate 3 million into the triple RF, right?
Make it
Instead
less.
of taking it from our budget, we use that to adjust it and lower that. That's the way to do it, because you can't transfer the money.
Okay, so that's,
Okay.
maybe that's exactly.
Certainly,
what
and
we're
so the
talking
transfer becomes less, but it's different pockets, the total top number is the same. But yes, but it's worth a discussion of how we do that. John, to you, and then we probably need to close. And after Larry.
I believe it's a related concern, and that is, I absolutely would support using truly unneeded reserves money to lower the assessment. However, I don't think it should be done, usually should not be done. Our practice should not be to do it now and then again, because that will cause a fluctuation. That will cause a fluctuation in assessments that will be politically unpalatable and will hurt our planning, consistency of our planning. So if we're going to do that, I think it should have some regularity. the slope should be predictable rather than merely episodic.
You're absolutely right. That's why we set off against maybe capital projects, but not the operating budget.
And I certainly would agree that assessment, the trajectory of assessments, that is
Should
one.
be smooth.
Should be smooth, and that is one tool to help keep it smooth, if, depending on what the situation is. So I think
So
we
how
would
much
agree.
reserves we can use next year, I think is dependent on having a
trajectory.
smooth slope.
That trajectory, I would agree.
And we need the updated reserve study done.
All right, Kathy, you've got
I
a
just
question, and
want-
Larry's gonna
no,
finish
I
us.
I just want to make sure on your list of things that you, don't forget, I want to know about the non-assessment revenue
Yes.
and how you would come up with that number.
Okay, very good, yeah.
Right,
It's
some of
a
the
lot-
stuff we
it's a
talked
lot
about
of- it's a
earlier
lot of
in
money.
terms of.
So, just to add, by the way, in our last fiscal committee meeting, we talked about using as much of actuals, like we talked about. Unless there is a reason for a higher projection to use actuals from perhaps this year, or just some sort of
trend.
way to historically figure out, rather than to just, forecast a number that cannot be
No, I don't think we
substantiated.
should, well, I mean, I don't think we should forecast that we're going to have an increase in it if we haven't made the goal.
Justification.
And if you don't, actuals, yeah, we should do it on the basis of actuals and with supporting data.
Okay, I think we need to close because it's getting late, but Larry's gonna close
So
this
two
comment.
things.
This
So
comment.
to your point, Kathy, I think if you look at the sheet with the culmination sheet with a lot of numbers, and you look across the forecast into the draft 2 budget, a perfect example that came up at the fiscal committee, look at tennis. Okay, there's an example where we're looking at, okay, I know Laura and Rob and Aaron have sat down and they've busted their heads and stuff, and so the numbers you see reflected now in draft 2 for revenue from tennis is much more realistic based upon this year's forecast. So just
Okay.
take a look at that. The second thing, going back to the reserve, Julie, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's an absolute great conversation to have, fiscal committee and the board level. But I want to put that little tiny flag of caution that we're going in to do a reserve study that we know, I can tell you right now, without having even putting out an RFP, it's going to cost more than what we think it is. Okay? Not to do the study, but the results. And so I just urge a little bit of caution that let's not be too freewheeling on the reserve side until we have a handle on that.
And again, was the exact reason of that smooth trajectory was the reason we put Resolution 3 in there in the RRF fund and the algorithm in the first place, so that there was a smooth trajectory of how much got transferred over there to accommodate the projected spend every year in capital. And this capital reserve study will, again, true that up, so we really have an idea of what that number is, so that the algorithm can work its magic, so.
And that'll fall into our 2-year budget cycle, too.
All right, so I think we're going to close the budget conversation. Ben, thank you so much for kind of giving us that high-level next
You guys
steps.
took notes on what are the items?
It's all
On tape.
It's all unfilled. And Mike takes great notes over there, too. So I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss personnel and contractual matters with consultation with counsel.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, we're going to move
Can we
into
take a-
executive
can we
session.
take a 2-minute
And we're going to
break?
take a 5-minute break in between. Stefan, we're closing off the mics.